The Lord of the Hidden Ring 2. Prologue. In a time when kingdoms rose and fell under the sword of ambition, Lydia shone like a pearl in the midst of fertile plains. Its cities were full of bustling markets, marble palaces and temples dedicated to the gods who watched over the fate of men. King Gyges, wise and courageous, ruled with a rare combination of power and mercy, and next to him, Queen Pyrisane shone like a living goddess, guarding the throne and the peace of the people. But peace never lasts long. Beyond the borders of Lydia, in the dark forests of Cimmeria, a mighty army was gathering, led by King Arganthos, a ruthless, ambitious, and proud man, ready to pierce the Lydian lands with sword and fire. The clouds of war were gathering slowly, and the wind brought news of fear and danger to every village and city. And in the midst of this tension, Gyges discovered a mysterious gift, a golden ring, a mysterious legacy of a lost past, which gave him the power to become invisible. This hidden weapon could change his fate, making him a master of the night and secrets, an unseen king who could penetrate hearts and cities without anyone seeing him. Soon, the king formed an elite body, the seven chosen: Ardys, Thyros, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, Damaris, Kallion, Phorbas, and Eirenaios, men chosen not only for their skill in battle, but also for their unwavering loyalty to the throne. Together, they would explore the enemy camps, gather vital information, and protect Lydia from the approaching danger. And this world full of shadows, intrigues, and mysteries, love was born as mysteriously as the shadows of the night. And a Cimmerian palace, a princess of rare beauty, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, carried her destiny with pride, not knowing that her fate would intersect with that of King Gyges. Bond will be born between them that will defy the laws of war, the ring of invisibility becoming witness to a forbidden love. This is the story of a hidden love, of a war that threatens to consume everything, and of a king caught between duty and desire. Story about power, betrayal, courage, and secrets, in which every choice will have its price, and the ring will be witness to the destiny of the two lovers. Thus begins the legend of King Gyges and Princess 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, a story about invisibility, love, and courage, in which nothing is what it seems, and in which every decision can change the fate of a kingdom. Chapter 1. The Clouds of War. At dawn on a stormy morning, heavy clouds rose above the capital of Ardys, as if the sky itself wanted to foretell the troubles that were to come. The rich and prosperous kingdom of Lydia had been living a period of apparent peace for several years, but unrest lurked deep within its borders. Trade had flourished, the temples were adorned with gold, and the palace of King Gyges enjoyed luxury and pomp. However, rumors of an uprising by the Cimmerians, a warlike and cruel people from the north, were spreading more and more rapidly. Messengers brought from the villages on the outskirts of the kingdom spoke of smoke on the horizon, of plundered flocks and burned villages. People were afraid, and merchants had begun to close their shops earlier. And the markets of Ardys, not only the clamor of merchants could be heard, but also whispers of swords drawn from their sheaths and of foreign tents rising beyond the mountains. Queen Pyrisane, a woman of cold beauty and rare intelligence, felt every day how the unrest of the people it was reflected in her own heart. And the throne room, where torchlight danced on the frescoed walls, she often sat beside her husband, listening to the messengers' reports. Although the king seemed calm, Pyrisane read a hidden disturbance in his eyes. She knew better than anyone that Gyges wore on his finger the ancient ring, inherited from a giant's tomb, ring that had given him the power to become king, but also the burden of secrets that no one else knew. The Cimmerians are moving fast, one of the counselors said one evening. If we don't stop them now, they will reach the gates of Ardys before the harvest is gathered. Gyges lowered his gaze, as if it weighed more than a simple military response. But Queen Pyrisane looked at him intently and said in a determined voice, "The people must feel that their king is not afraid. Show them that you will raise your sword for them, and their courage will be reborn." King Gyges smiled weakly. He loved Pyrisane for the clarity of her mind and for the strength with which she always stood by his side, even when the shadows of the past haunted them. But deep down he knew that this war would be different from the others. It was not just a confrontation for borders or wealth. The Cimmerians had a special cruelty, and rumors said that their king, Arganthos, consulted sorcerers and read the stars to choose the day of his attack. A night, when silence fell over the palace, Pyrisane could not sleep. He walked barefoot through the halls dark and often stood on the balcony, looking at the mountains to the north. She felt a strange thrill in her heart, as if her destiny and that of all Lydia were about to be tested by an unstoppable storm. She feared not only for the throne and the people, but also for Gyges. For several years she had seen him changed. The power of invisibility, which only she knew, had isolated him from the world. Sometimes he was silent and cold, sometimes agitated, his eyes burning with a desire that she could not fully understand. One of those nights, when the king seemed lost in thought, Queen Pyrisane put her hand on his arm and whispered, Tell me, my husband, what worries you more? The spears of the Cimmerians or your shadows? Gyges started. He looked at her deeply, but did not answer. It was hard for him to admit that a part of him was eagerly awaiting this war as an opportunity to use the power of the ring again. For invisibility gave him not only a military advantage, but also a dizzying sensation of absolute freedom. The next morning, the councillors gathered in the great hall. Huge map of the border had been spread out on the table. Small bronze flags showed the positions of the Cimmerians, and the places where the roads led to the heart of Lydia were marked with red pebbles. We must form an elite guard, King Gyges proposed. We cannot send the entire army into the unknown. I need the 7 bravest men to be my shadow and shield. Those present murmured, and Pyrisane, although he hid his astonishment, felt that this was only the beginning of a greater plan. Gyges wanted to leave, to see the enemy with his own eyes. He knew that once he used the ring, no one and nothing would be able to stop his desire to penetrate the secrets of the Cimmerians. And the days that followed, news of the preparations spread throughout the kingdom and the markets. Women hugged their husbands and sons, and men boasted that their king would defeat them. However, behind the displayed courage, unrest simmered. No matter how rich the kingdom was, no one could be sure that it would withstand a wild beast that came from the northern steppes. Pyrisane retreated more and more often to the temple of the goddess Ardys, where she prayed in secret. Sometimes she asked for victory, sometimes she just asked for her husband to be kept alive. Her heart was torn between her duty as a queen and her love as a woman. She knew that if Gyges fell, the entire kingdom would collapse with him. One evening, as the sun set red as blood, an owl sat on the palace wall. The guard saw it and made signs of protection, considering it a bad omen. Pyrisane, however, watched it with wide eyes. For her, it was a confirmation of what she felt in her soul, that the gods were looking down, attentive to every step, and that the coming war would change the fate of Lydia forever. Thus, the clouds of war gathered not only in the sky, but also in the hearts of the people, and although no arrow had yet fallen, the kingdom of Lydia was preparing for the storm that was to break out. Pyrisane knew that soon the silence of the palace would be shattered by cries, and blood would flow on the fields where grain once lay. All he could do was watch, strengthen the king's will, and pray that the gods had not turned their faces from them. But somewhere, deep in the night, Gyges felt that the clouds of war brought with them not only danger, but also the call of a destiny stranger than he could have imagined. Chapter 2. The Queen's Advice. The palace of Ardys, the glittering residence of the kings of Lydia, was bathed in a tired afternoon light, and the inner courtyards, the fountains still sang softly, but their peace was only a thin facade. Beyond the stone walls, the roads were filled with gathering troops, and merchants brought contradictory news. Some said that the Cimmerian army was rising to thousands of swords, others that their sorcery made them invincible, and this mixture of rumors and unrest, Queen Pyrisane felt her soul caught between two flames. She knew her husband well. King Gyges was a man of deeds, silence, and sharp decisions, but also a man troubled by shadows. The ring that had made him king was a weapon and a burden. Sometimes, when she saw him, she twisted her finger without realizing it, remembering how she had come to the throne, through betrayal, blood, and secrets. Pyrisane loved him, but she was not deceived. She knew that that ring could be both her salvation and her destruction. That day, she called him to the jasmine garden of the palace. The air smelled sweet, but the wind that blew through the branches brought unease. Queen Pyrisane wore a simple dress, but her eyes were determined. "Gyges," she said in a firm voice, "we must speak not as husband and wife, but as king and queen." Gyges looked up from the ground. He knew him well enough to know that her tone did not allow for delay. They sat down on the marble bench, far from the ears of the courtiers. Only the murmur of the water in the fountain accompanied their words. "The kingdom is restless," Pyrisane continued. "News of the Cimmerians is spreading. The people need to feel that their king is not just hearing these rumors, but taking action. If we do not show strength, fear will conquer Ardys before their spears reach the walls." Gyges sighed deeply. It was a sigh that carried the weight of a man caught between duty to the throne and his instincts. "I know, Pyrisane, I know I must raise my sword, but this is not a war like any other. The Cimmerians do not come only for gold or land. They are driven by a fire I do not understand. And there is something else. They say their king has sorcerers on his side." "Witchcraft or not," Pyrisane replied with a steely twinkle in her eyes, "you are the king of Lydia. The gods do not give the crown to a weak man. You cannot let rumors paralyze your heart. If the enemy has shadows, you have the light and power that the gods have entrusted to you." Gyges looked at her carefully. He knew that Pyrisane was not a woman who allowed herself to be carried away by superstitions. She was pragmatic, lucid, sometimes even cold. But her words always brought him a balance, as if a kind of voice of destiny had lived in her soul. "Pyrisane," he said quietly, "do you know what any means? What if my invisibility is discovered? What if the gods turn their backs on me for daring to walk unseen among men?" The queen placed her hand on his, firm but warm. "My husband, listen to me carefully. Power is not a gift given at random. You were chosen to wear this ring, whether by the gods or by fate. If you used it to become king, now you will use it to defend your people. What is the point of wearing the crown of Lydia on your shoulders if at the first storm you let it fall? Any means exactly that. Use everything you have to save us." Her words were like sharp blades that split the king's veil of doubts, and the silence that fell. Only the song of a bird hidden among the branches was heard. Gyges felt the tension melt from his shoulders, but in its place a sharp determination was born. "You speak like a true queen, Pyrisane," he whispered. "And yet, don't you fear that this war will change me?" She smiled weakly at him, a smile that hid an uneasiness that only she could understand. "Gyges, war changes everyone. There is no king, general, or soldier who comes out of battle the same man he went in. But I do not fear change, I fear only indecision. If you hesitate, if you let fear paralyze your heart, then I have already lost." The king clenched his fists. His gaze lit up like a rekindled ember. "Then I will raise the sword," he said firmly. "But not just the sword, I will know them from the inside. I will discover their weaknesses. The ring will be my hidden weapon." That moment, Pyrisane felt a thrill. She loved him and admired him for his determination, but at the same time she knew that invisibility was a double-edged sword. It could bring her victory, but also unimaginable temptations. However, she looked at him with all her faith and said, "Then go, my king, and do what is right. But never forget, you are first of the people and only then yours. Do not let yourself be swallowed by the shadows of the ring." They both rose. Beyond the walls of the palace, the sun was setting red, painting the sky like a warning. The advisors were waiting for them, and the Lydian army had to be prepared. But at that moment, an understanding was formed between Gyges and Pyrisane, silent, that this war would test them not only as king and queen, but also as husband and wife. And the days that followed, Queen Pyrisane's words echoed in Gyges' mind like an unwavering refrain, "by any means." And with every step he took toward preparations, his resolve grew stronger. It was not just a king who had to defend his kingdom, was the master of a secret that could tip the balance of a war. But what neither he nor Pyrisane could foresee was that on this path to victory he would encounter something more powerful than the war itself, a temptation hidden in the eyes of a Cimmerian princess, which would change their fate forever. Chapter 3. The Seven Chosen. At dawn on a clear day, when the first rays of the sun caressed the white walls of Ardys, King Gyges summoned a small gathering in the great hall of the palace. The throne of gold and ivory shone behind him, but his attention was not on riches, but on a decision that would change the course of the war. It needed a handful of trustworthy men, warriors who were not only brave but loyal to the death. The war that was preparing could not be won with a large army alone, but with a well-chosen force, with souls capable of following the king even in the deepest darkness. Thus, that day, Gyges decided to create an elite body, a small circle of 7 men, each chosen not only for their skill in battle, but also for their strength of heart. They would become the chosen 7 of Lydia, the king's personal shield, but also the hidden sword that would pierce the heart of any threat. Ardys, the one born of royal blood. The first of them was Ardys, a young prince from a secondary branch of the Lydian dynasty. Raised in the shadow of the throne, Ardys had never been destined to rule, but his blood connected him to Gyges. Had a stern face, emerald green eyes, and a proud stature. Was a master of the sword, but what made him invaluable was his deep knowledge of the laws and customs of his people. Ardys represented the voice of tradition, and Gyges knew that his presence in this elite body would give confidence to the soldiers. "My blood is of kings, but my sword is yours, Gyges," he said before the court. "As long as I breathe, no enemy will pass my shield." Thyros, son of the mountain. The second was Thyros, a giant from the mountains of 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉. He had grown up among shepherds, but had made himself known as an invincible fighter in the ritual battles of the villages. His arms looked like tree trunks, and the giant axe he carried could split a galloping horse in two. People said that the mountain itself had given him strength. Thyros did not speak much, but his deep gaze inspired both respect and fear. "The mountain raised me, the king called me," he answered simply. "I do not need another oath." 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, the cunning strategist. The third chosen one was 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉, a man with a sharp mind and unusually quick thinking. Unlike the others, he was not renowned for his physical strength, but for his ability to turn battles around through ingenious plans. He had been a cavalry commander and had conquered fortresses without lifting a sword, only through traps and diversions. He had brown eyes, always moving, and a barely outlined smile, as if ideas were constantly being born in his mind. "Give me an army of 100, and I will defeat 1,000, he often said. "But if you give me these 7, I will even bring you the head of the Cimmerian king, Damaris, the lightning spear." The fourth was Damaris, the youngest of them, but with an extraordinary skill. He had been raised in a family of archers, but he preferred the spear, which he threw with amazing precision. It was said that he could pierce a bird in flight or hit the core of a flame without touching the embers. He had blonde hair like ears of wheat and an unstoppable energy. If the others were rocks, Damaris was the spark that ignites the fire. "Let me be your lightning, my king," he said with burning eyes. "I will strike first, where the enemy thinks he is invisible." Kallion, the heart of the people. The fifth was Kallion, a man of medium height, without imposing features, but with a rare quality. He inspired confidence in everyone around him. Raised among peasants, he had never forgotten the voice of the simple people. He knew how to play the lyre and always carried with him the memories of his native village and the army. The soldiers loved him and followed him without hesitation, for he had the gift of lifting souls even in the most difficult moments. "It is not the sword that makes me invincible, but the voice of those who believe in me," he often said. "I believe in you too, Gyges." Phorbas, the hunter's shadow. The sixth chosen one was Phorbas, a hunter from the dense forests of Lydia. His body was sculpted by years of stalking through the forests, and his black eyes were as silent as the night. He wielded his bow with an almost supernatural dexterity, and his short daggers were like extensions of his arms. It was said that Phorbas could disappear into the darkness, and that even wolves did not dare to stand in his way. "I have hunted beasts and been silent with the forest," he said before the king. "But for you, Gyges, I will hunt men." Eirenaios, the wise one. The last of the 7 was Eirenaios, a man in his 40s, with gray hair and eyes of disturbing silence. He had once been a priest of Apollo, but had chosen the sword over incantations. Although he was no longer, he wore the sacred vestments. His voice held a divine authority. He was the one who balanced the ardor of the others, bringing peace between their spirits. For Gyges, Eirenaios was not only a fighter, but also a conscience, an advisor in moments of doubt. "I serve the gods, now I serve the king. But do not forget, Gyges, that no man is above divine judgment," he told him in a gentle but firm voice. The oath of the 7. The 7 gathered in the great hall of the palace, before the throne. Gyges looked at each one individually: the royal blood, the giant, the strategist, the spearman, the folk singer, the hunter, and the fallen priest. They were as different as night and day, but together they formed a circle of power and balance, and in the middle of the room burned a great flame, the symbol of Lydia. Each of the 7 placed his hand on his chest and uttered the oath. "By life and by death, by blood and by glory, we will be the shield and sword of King Gyges." The king stood up and, for a moment, rested his palm on the fire, as if he had bound their oath by his own will. "And I swear," he said, "that I will never forget that I am not just a man, but the one who carries the destiny of a people. Together, we will overturn the clouds of war and show the world that Lydia does not fall." From then on, the 7 chosen were no longer just fighters, but the shadow of the king. They followed him everywhere, trained day and night, and watched over him like gods of war. People looked at them with fear and respect, and rumors about them were already spreading in the fairs. 7 men, chosen by the king, each with a unique power, each ready to die for Lydia. But what they did not yet know was that this war would test them not only in battle, but also in their souls. For beyond the battlefields, a Cimmerian princess would open a wound in the heart of King Gyges, a wound that neither sword, nor crown, nor even the ring of invisibility could heal. Chapter 4. The Expedition. The wind blew coldly over the walls of Ardys on the morning when King Gyges and his 7 elite warriors prepared to depart, and the central square. People had gathered to see them off, for their departure was not a simple expedition, but the beginning of a fight for the very survival of Lydia. The temple bells rang heavily, and the priests burned incense to ask the gods for protection over the king. Queen Pyrisane, dressed in a blue cloak, descended the palace steps with measured steps. Her court ladies accompanied her, but her gaze was fixed only on Gyges. Although she hid her worries behind an impassive face, her heart was torn. She loved the king and knew that deep within his soul burned the same flame, but this time the ring and the war took its place. "Bring me victory, but bring me peace, Gyges," she whispered as he approached. "Lydia needs you, but I need my husband." The king touched her hand, for a moment so brief it seemed like a breeze, then looked at the 7 Ardys, Thyros, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝑓, Damaris, Kallion, Phorbas, and Eirenaios stood ready, each with his weapons and armor, each determined to set out without looking back. The 8 left Ardys to the sound of trumpets. The people followed them hopefully, throwing flowers and raising their hands to the sky. Their horses, strong and well-fed, strode proudly along the cobblestone road that led to the northern borders. As they advanced, the fertile hills of Lydia turned into vast plains, then into rocky hills. The sun was gentle, but beneath this calm was the tension of war. Each step brought them closer to the Cimmerians, a harsh and warlike people who feared neither gods nor death. On the way, the seven spoke little, but each showed his determination in his own way. Ardys told stories about the strategies of the ancient battles of the Lydian kings, reminding them of how important it was to preserve honor. Thyros sharpened his huge axe, saying that iron must sing before battle. Meles analyzed every bend in the road, every valley, as if he had memorized the map for future maneuvers. Damaris threw spears into the trunks of trees on the side of the road, practicing with precision. Kallion played his lyre, raising the morale of the group. Phorbas was silent, his eyes searching the surrounding forests, always alert for any sign of danger. Eirenaios said prayers, asking the gods for the blessing of each of them. King Gyges, riding in the lead, looked far away, but in his mind a thought bubbled that no one could guess: the ring. Its power could be the key to this war, but also the greatest curse. He knew that Pyrisane suspected the truth, but no one else was allowed to know. After a day's journey, they stopped on the bank of a clear river. The horses were let out to graze, and the fire was quickly lit. Damaris hunted birds for dinner. Phorbas pitched the tents, and Kallion began to sing an old hymn of the Lydian soldiers. Around the fire, the king spoke to them for the first time about their mission. We do not go to conquer, but to find out. The Cimmerian camps grow bigger every day. If we know their plans, we will have a chance to stop them before the storm breaks. You are my shield and my shadow. But sometimes I will have to walk alone, where even your sword cannot follow me. A murmur of astonishment went through the group. They did not yet know why he said these words. Only Eirenaios looked at him for a long time, as if he understood more than the others. Thyros put his hand on his heart. Wherever you go, king, we will wait for you. If the enemies do not see you, it does not mean that you are alone. The following days, the expedition advanced through dense forests and narrow valleys. The land became increasingly wild, and the traces of Cimmerian patrols began to be seen. The smoke of distant fires betrayed the proximity of their camps. One evening, Phorbas, who had gone out to scout, returned in a hurry. "They are close," he said. "I saw guards and tents on the hill to the north. A great army is gathering." King Gyges looked up at the cloudy sky. His heart told him that the time had come. "Tomorrow night I will enter their camp," he announced. The seven looked at each other, puzzled. How could one man penetrate the midst of his enemies and return alive? But no one dared to ask him how. At dawn the next day, King Gyges rose from his tent and called his men. "You stay here," he told them. "I will sneak in alone. Be careful not to be discovered. What I find will be the key to our victory." Ardys took a step forward. "The king does not go alone. Let us accompany you." But Gyges stopped him with a gesture. "No, Ardys. Where I go, neither you nor anyone else can tread." He turned, stepping into the forest. And then, for the first time on this expedition, he spun his ring. A moment later, his body disappeared as if melting into thin air. Only his footsteps remained, rustling through the foliage. Then they too faded. The seven remained silent, each thinking the same thing. Their king had a power beyond comprehension. Invisibly, Gyges advanced towards the enemy camps. From behind the curtains of trees, he saw a sea of gray tents, guarded by fires and guarded by warriors with long hair and heavy weapons. He heard them speaking in their harsh language, boasting of the spoils they would take from Ardys. He stepped among them, unseen, smelling the smell of burning flesh and unwashed skins. The sound of weapons, the clatter of horses, the brutal laughter of the soldiers, all filled his ears. Further in, he found the general's tent. Inside, on a large wooden table, maps were spread out. Gyges approached and listened. The Cimmerian general spoke in a thunderous voice. "In 3 days, we will begin the assault. The first blow will be on the northern fort of Lydia. There we will crush their defenses and open the way to Ardys." Gyges clenched his fists. He had the information he needed. But what he had not foreseen was that at that moment he would glance at a smaller tent, adjacent to the general's. From behind the curtain a delicate, feminine voice was heard, speaking a Cimmerian song. The voice echoed in his soul like an unknown call. It was the first time that, in the midst of the war, Gyges felt anything other than hatred or duty. Chapter 5. The First Incursion. Night had fallen over the northern plains, and the full moon slowly illuminated the Cimmerian village on the edge of the 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 forest. The wind carried the scent of smoke and wild animals, and the stars were reflected in the dew-drenched meadows. King Gyges stood hidden in the shade of the trees, feeling his heart pounding. The 7 chosen waited for him at the edge of the forest, tending the fire and alert for any sign of danger. But for Gyges, the real adventure began now. Invisible through the power of his ring, he walked silently towards the first Cimmerian village. He felt the shadows protecting him, how every leaf, every twig, seemed to help him pass unnoticed. The village was apparently asleep, but Gyges knew that the silence was only a cloak under which plans and secrets were hidden. Gyges stopped in the center of the village, invisible to human eyes. He looked at the wooden houses, small and simple, but each carefully built for defense. Around the campfires, a few guards watched over the sleep of others, and the battered doors were propped up with stones to make them harder to open. He listened carefully and heard the first whispers. "If we don't hurry, Lydia's northern fort will be ready before we attack," said an old man with a white beard, around 70 years old. "So be it. The king of Cimmeria demands discipline, otherwise we will not pass their walls," added another, younger one. Gyges moved slowly, keeping his distance. Listening, he understood more than they spoke. Every expression, every sigh, every gesture of the hand indicated fears, insecurities, hidden plans. The village was not just their place of residence. It was the starting point for strategies that were to shake Lydia, and a house larger than the others, with a thatched roof and thick oak doors. Gyges felt a special tension, entered, invisible, almost floating above the wooden floor, and approached the table at which several old Cimmerians were sitting. They were discussing maps and symbols unknown to Gyges, but he could read their intentions better than any map. "We must attack the northern fort in 3 days, said an old man, pointing to a location marked with a red cross. "If we don't strike now, Lydia will strengthen the defenses and we will be stopped." "Do we have enough swords and spears?" asked another, trembling slightly. "We have, but discipline will make the difference. Without it, our blood will flow in vain." Gyges clenched his fists. He now understood where and how to strike Lydia. This information was more valuable than any army. The knowledge gained this night could save thousands of lives in his kingdom. Invisible, Gyges walked from house to house, observing the customs of the Cimmerians. Every detail mattered: the way they guarded their supplies, the way they guarded their torches, the patrol positions of the young and inexperienced soldiers. In a corner, a young woman, with hair as black as ebony, was cleaning dishes, and he, invisible, felt a strange thrill. Without knowing why, her voice echoed in his mind more than any sound of battle. It was a melody full of sadness and delicacy, of a beauty that made him forget the danger. "Who are you?" he whispered, but received no answer. The ring gave him power, but it did not reveal her name. As he explored, Gyges heard hurried footsteps. Young soldiers approached the house, looking for strangers or suspicious shadows. His heart beat faster, but he remained still. The invisibility of the ring allowed him to stand and observe without being discovered. The soldiers passed by him, talking among themselves about the shadows they had sensed but could not see. Gyges remembered the words of Eirenaios. Power does not exempt from the temptation to err. Even now, he could do anything: sabotage them, steal the maps, strike, but his determination was not to be carried away by impulse. Strategy required patience, not uncalculated violence. Later, Gyges left the houses and approached the outskirts of the village, where several Cimmerian generals were discussing plans for battle. They checked the weapons and horses, distributed the supplies, and dictated the order of the patrols. "Let the first line of attack be prepared," said one of the generals. "Any inattention will be punished with death." Gyges noted every detail in his mind, learned where the troops were concentrated, who the influential leaders were, what their weaknesses were, and most importantly, where their vulnerability lay. The northern fort had no complete defenses behind it, and the supply routes were poorly guarded. Invisible, he could enter their tents, listen to their whispers, and understand what Lydia would do to protect herself. The ring gave him the freedom to know everything without fear of being caught. In a more secluded tent, Gyges caught sight of the young Cimmerian princess, Seraphina, for the first time. She was beautiful, with eyes as black as night and a royal grace that took his breath away. He caught sight of her looking down at military documents, taking notes, and giving orders to his soldiers. "Who are you?" he asked himself. "Is she a princess or a witch of the forest?" Unknowingly, Gyges felt a mysterious attraction, a feeling that transcended strategy and battle. Even in the midst of his war plans, his heart skipped a beat. When the village fell into relative silence, King Gyges retreated through the 𝕳𝖓𝖌 forest, reappearing before the 7. They waited for him patiently, but with concern. "Have you learned everything you needed to?" Ardys asked, his voice filled with respect and anxiety. Gyges nodded. "Yes, I know the Cimmerians' plans. The northern fort will be attacked in 3 days. We have time to prepare. But I saw something else, a girl. The young woman who leads with intelligence and grace. I don't know who she is yet, but she will have a greater role than any general or soldier." The seven had remained silent. They did not yet understand what that statement meant, but they felt that their mission went beyond any ordinary war. This night had been the beginning of a series of invisible incursions, which would bring vital information to Lydia. King Gyges had realized that the power of the ring did not only mean invisibility and control, it also meant responsibility, discernment, and patience. Every secret learned was a weapon, every detail, a piece in the chess game of war. But deep down, the thought of Seraphina grew. She was becoming a living presence in his mind, a silent challenge that would follow him all the course of future expeditions. Thus ends King Gyges' first incursion into the Cimmerian village, a combination of strategy, mystery, and a spark of desire that would ignite the flame of a story much more complex than the war itself. Chapter 6. Secrets of the Army. Night had fallen again over the borderlands, and the 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 forest seemed quieter than ever. The chosen seven waited, hidden in the thickets, and a few embers burned almost completely extinguished next to them. King Gyges knew that now was the time. The first incursion had revealed the general intentions of the Cimmerians, but to defend his kingdom he needed clear details. How many soldiers the enemy had, on what roads he could surprise them, where they had hidden their weapons. He pulled his cloak tight around his shoulders, closed his eyes, and turned the ring on his finger. Like a breeze, his body melted into the air, remaining only an invisible presence. The seven understood the signal. Gyges was once again setting out on his secret mission, and they must watch quietly, without putting questions. Gyges descended through the centuries-old oaks and approached the large Cimmerian camp. Unlike the modest village he had visited the night before, here he saw tents erected in order, torches burning, armed guards, and horses tied to stakes. The smell of hot iron and tanned leather filled his nostrils, a sign that the blacksmiths had not stopped working on weapons even at night. He crept through the rows of tents, feeling how the soldiers slept on animal skins, while the officers watched over maps and parchments. And his eyes, the entire camp was an anthill of discipline and strength, but also a web of weaknesses. If you knew where to look, in a larger tent, with a black banner and an eagle painted on the canvas, several commanders were discussing heatedly. Gyges entered without fear. Leaning over the table, unfolded parchments showed lists of names and numbers. 10,000 spearmen, a general reported in a harsh voice. 4,000 archers, and 2,000 heavy cavalry, the best I have ever trained. Those from the west? Asked another. They are coming in 2 days. 3,000 more foot soldiers and 600 light cavalry. Gyges clenched his invisible fists. In total, an army of almost 20,000 souls. 3 times the army that Lydia could raise in such a short time. But for each number he remembered, his mind was already calculating. Retreat positions, places where the archers could be defeated, roads where the cavalry could be blocked. Leaving the tent, they crept to the edge of the camp, where several Cimmerian scouts were preparing to leave. They were gathering their quivers and murmuring among themselves about the secret path of the hunters. Gyges followed them. The three set off through the forest, and the king, invisible, accompanied them like a ghost. They descended into a wet valley, where water flowed between the rocks and where a cobblestone road was barely discernible. "If our king decides to attack from the north, this short road will take us directly behind the Lydian walls," said one of the scouts. "They won't even know what hit them." King Gyges felt a cold shiver. This was a mortal danger to his kingdom. If he hadn't discovered it now, the Cimmerian army could get behind the defenders and slaughter them mercilessly. He memorized every stone, every turn. When he returned, he would tell the chosen how to destroy or block this road. Back in camp, the king followed other groups of soldiers. A tent guarded by 4 guards caught his attention. He slipped past them, invisible, and entered. There, his eyes widened. Stacks of arrows, new bows, short spears, shields of bronze-hardened wood, all laid out in order. But more than in one corner were large iron chests covered with buffalo hides. Gyges approached and saw inside curved blades, long knives, and arrows with blackened tips. He smelled them and understood. They were dipped in poison. "If these weapons reach the battlefield, we will die before we know why," he thought. He bit his lips, frustrated that he could take nothing with him. But information was more valuable than any sword. Later, in the largest tent in the middle of the camp, the most important generals had gathered. Gyges followed them patiently. They were bent over a large map, marked with red lines. "The first blow will be on the northern fort," said the supreme commander, a massive man with emerald green eyes. "While they defend themselves there, we will send the cavalry through the hidden path to the fortress of Ardys." "And the archers?" asked another. "They will wait on the western hills. When the Lydians retreat, We will catch them between spearmen and arrows. Gyges listened to every word. The plan was brilliant, but now he knew it. And in war, knowing the opponent's move before they made it was tantamount to victory. As he prepared to leave, Gyges caught sight of Princess Seraphina again. This time, she entered the general's tent, wearing a blue cloak embroidered with royal symbols, and in her hands were scrolls of parchment. "This is the list of the best riders," she said in a calm voice. "We must keep them close to me. If they succeed in penetrating behind the Lydian walls, victory is ours." Gyges felt his heart jump. She was not only beautiful, but intelligent, a living part of the enemy's strategy. He realized that he would meet again, that their destiny was already bound by unseen threads. After gathering all the information, the king left the camp and retreated through the forest. His heart was beating fast, but his steps were sure. When the ring turned again and his body became visible, the 7 watched him expectantly. "Tell us, master, what have you learned?" asks Thyros. Gyges takes a deep breath. "There are 20,000, and they have secret roads, poisoned weapons, plans to surround us. If we do not stop them, Ardys will fall." The chosen froze, but their courage did not waver. "Then we must strike them before they strike," said Kallion. Gyges nodded. "Yes, but wisely. We have an advantage in our hands that they do not suspect. We know their every step." That night, before falling asleep under the starry sky, Gyges looked longingly at the ring. Its power was a gift and a curse. It offered him knowledge, but also the temptation to use too much, to give in to hidden desires. He knew that from now on, each incursion would bring him closer not only to military victory, but also to a secret of his heart, the unseen connection with Seraphina. For the moment, however, he had to be a king, a leader, a strategist. War was knocking at the door, and he was the only one who truly knew how many shadows were hiding in the Cimmerian camp. King Gyges had accomplished his mission. He had stolen vital information from the heart of the enemy camp. He knew how many soldiers were rising against him, where they wanted to enter, and what weapons' hidden secrets they had prepared. But, with this knowledge, something else was also born in his soul, an incomprehensible longing for the Cimmerian princess, the one who appeared more and more often in his plans, and who, without knowing it, had stirred his heart. With each step, Gyges realized that the war would not only be a clash of arms, but also a battle of destinies, where love and betrayal would intertwine with the sword and blood. Chapter 7. In the enemy's palace. Night had fallen heavily over the northern plains, and the wind brought with it the smell of the steppe and the smoke of fires. And the distance, the walls of the Cimmerian palace rose high, shining in the moonlight like a fortress of black stone. King Gyges now faced his most daring mission, to penetrate the heart of the enemy into the palace of Arganthos, king of the Cimmerians. Here, in the large and richly decorated rooms, hid not only war plans, but also secrets that could change the fate of the entire conflict. Gyges knew that he was risking everything. If he had been caught, not even the ring could have saved him from the wrath of the Cimmerians. However, the power of invisibility gave him courage, and the thought of Queen Pyrisane and her people pushed him forward. Arriving at the great iron gate, he saw how the torches burned brightly, illuminating the cruel faces of the guards. 20 soldiers guarded the entrance, armed with long spears and wide shields. Any other man would have been stopped, but Gyges, turning the ring, slipped unseen among them. He felt like a cold wind sliding through narrow spaces, without anyone noticing his presence. Beyond the gate, the corridors of the palace greeted him with a mixture of barbaric luxury and military rigor. On the walls hung heavy carpets, woven with symbols of the Cimmerians, wolves, eagles, and red stars. Bronze scales and helmets ornamentals were placed like trophies, mementos of battles won. Gyges entered a huge hall, where the tables were still full of leftovers, roasted meat, round loaves of bread, jugs of red wine. Few Cimmerian nobles were still feasting, laughing loudly and banging their cups on the table. Between the jokes and scattered songs, words of war slipped in. "Arganthos promised us rich lands," said one with a matted beard. "After we conquer Ardys, each of us will have a share of Lydia." "And women," added another, provoking laughter. Gyges looked at them with disgust, but he controlled his anger. He now understood not only the cruelty but also the greed of these people. The war was not only for glory, but for plunder. And in another part of the palace, Gyges discovered the inner courtyard. Marble fountains brought a pleasant murmur, and gardens with exotic flowers spread heavy perfumes. The ladies of the court walked by torchlight, wearing silk dresses and heavy gold ornaments. Their voices were full of curiosity and gossip. "They say that Princess Seraphina will be betrothed to the Supreme General," whispered one of them. "No way," replied another. "King Arganthos wants her close to the throne, but the girl refuses to obey. Seraphina's name made Gyges start. He saw her again, in his mind, in the blue cloak, talking to the generals. He wondered what forces were driving the young princess, and if her heart was as tied to war as her father's. The path then took him to the throne room. The heavy door, locked with iron, opened under the footsteps of soldiers entering and leaving. Gyges slipped in with them. Inside, on a throne carved from black and gilded wood, sat Arganthos, the king of the Cimmerians. Was a massive man, with long black hair, a beard braided in strands, and his eyes sparkled with cold cruelty. Wore a red cloak embroidered with eagles on his shoulders, and next to him stood his giant sword. Before him, the generals bowed and reported, "The army is ready, your majesty. 20,000 soldiers, ready to go at any time." Arganthos raised his hand. "Ardys must fall in a single month. Lydia will be brought to its knees, and I will be named the Lord of the Steppes and the Golden Cities." Gyges felt his blood boil. He swore to himself that this plan would not succeed. From the throne room, the invisible king followed a scribe carrying parchments into a small room, hidden behind a thick curtain. There, on a stone table, were meticulously drawn maps. Every road, every step of the Cimmerian army was plotted. Gyges approached and looked at them carefully. The map showed not only the main roads, but also tunnels hidden under the palace, used as emergency exits. One of these galleries led directly north, to the steppe, a place where the army could retreat or attack unexpectedly. This discovery deeply disturbed him. He understood now that Arganthos' power lay not only in the number of soldiers, but also in these secrets hidden in the heart of the palace. As he studied the maps, he heard light footsteps. Princess 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖊𝖓 entered the room, carrying an oil lamp. The light revealed her pale but determined face. Her brown eyes shone with a special intelligence. She approached the table and touched the maps with her delicate hands. "My father does not see," she whispered, "but the war is not only his. If it continues, blood will cover both kingdoms." Gyges stopped, troubled. He heard her talking to herself, not knowing that he was being listened to, and her voice there was not only pain, but also a thirst for justice. If only there were someone to put an end to this madness, she continued, then sighed deeply. Gyges' heart struggled like a bird trapped in a cage. He wanted to show himself, to tell her who he was, but he knew it was too soon. For the moment, silence was his only weapon. Leaving the secret chamber, the invisible king walked through other rooms. He saw how the nobles divided their spoils before the war began, how the servants ran tiredly, how the children played in the corridors without knowing what was coming. The palace was a mirror of the Cimmerians, strong and disciplined, but also corrupted by the desire for wealth and glory, and that mixture of pomp and brutality. Gyges discovered not only the enemy's strength, but also his weaknesses: arrogance, greed, lack of unity in the court. After hours of wandering around the palace, the king understood that he had learned enough. He crept through the corridors again, past the guards, and out through the iron gate, unseen, just as he had entered. When he reached the forest, the rotation of the ring made his body visible again. He breathed deeply, as if he had escaped from a cage full of lions. The seven were waiting for him, their eyes questioning. "I have seen everything," said Gyges in a serious voice. "The enemy's palace is a nest of vipers, but I found weaknesses there too. I now know how Arganthos thinks, and I have learned something more. 𝕳𝖉𝖊𝖓 is not like the others." The chosen ones looked at him in bewilderment, but they did not dare to ask questions. That night, Gyges could not sleep. The weight of the secrets he had discovered and the image of 𝕳𝖉𝖊𝖓, which remained vivid in his mind, weighed on him. The ring had given him the power to penetrate the enemy's heart, but with each step, he felt himself becoming more and more trapped in an invisible web. Arganthos' palace was not only a stone fortress. It was the symbol of a cruel world, but also the scene where his destiny would inevitably meet that of the princess. He knew that, sooner or later, he would return there. But then he would no longer be just an unseen shadow, but a man who would have to show your true colors. Chapter 8. The Burning Gaze. The night spent in the Cimmerian palace had left Gyges with a troubled heart. He had discovered vital secrets about the enemy, but also something much harder to bear. The image of Princess 𝕳𝖉𝖊𝖓, her face, illuminated by the flame of the small oil lamp, had remained imprinted on his soul deeper than any map, any war plan. It was not only her beauty, although beauty was of a striking rarity, but also the restlessness that shone in her eyes, that trembling of the soul caught between duty and freedom. It. Dawn the next day, fate would bring them face to face again, at the edge of the walls. The Cimmerians were organizing fairs for soldiers and nobles. The markets were bustling with life. Colorful carpets, new weapons, spices brought from the steppe, black horses with rich manes. Gyges and the seven chosen, disguised in merchants, mingled among the people. The ring gave the king invisibility, but this time he had chosen to leave it only on his finger. He had to feel the world, to look openly, even if he risked being discovered. And then he saw her. 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖊𝖓 had descended into the square accompanied by several servants and 2 guards. She wore a long, deep blue dress, embroidered with silver threads, a white cloak covered her shoulders, and her black hair, braided with thin ribbons, fell down her back like a dark wave. Around her, people moved aside. Some bowed respectfully, others just looked at her with fear. 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓 did not seem to notice. Her eyes, large and burning, looked over the crowd with an intensity that made to silence every whisper. That look struck Gyges, a look that seemed to burn everything it encountered. For a moment, her eyes stopped on him, without her knowing who he was. She felt his piercing like an arrow. He was no longer invisible, but her heart told her that she wished she were, so that he wouldn't see the trembling of her soul. 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓 stopped at a stall with bronze mirrors and necklaces of colored stones. She raised her delicate hand and touched a pendant in the shape of a lotus flower. "Beautiful, but cold," she said, leaving him alone. Gyges stood nearby, pretending to study a blacksmith's blades. As she passed him, the wind carried his scent, a mixture of wild rose and myrrh. She felt every fiber of her body shuddered. A careless vendor dropped a heavy jug from his hands, which rolled towards the princess's feet. In an instinctive movement, Gyges grabbed it before the vessel could touch her. He looked up and met her eyes. "Thank you, stranger," 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓 said, her voice sweet but firm. Gyges tilted his head slightly, trying to mask his emotion. "The honor is mine." Mississippi, her gaze measured him carefully, as if trying to penetrate his secrets. And for a moment, Gyges had the impression that his invisibility was not due to a ring, but to her will, and before 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓's eyes, there was no hiding place. Towards evening, fate brought them together again. While he had slipped into the palace under the guise of a scribe, Gyges arrived at a room filled with scrolls and clay tablets. The Cimmerian library housed ancient knowledge, maps, poems, and laws. There, he met 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓 again. She was reading an old manuscript, and the oil lamp illuminated her face with a warm aura. "I haven't seen you around here before," she said without looking up. "Who are you?" Gyges felt his heart stop. Her question presented him with a choice, to lie or to get caught up in a dangerous game. "I am only a seeker of knowledge," he answered, "man who loves words and stories." 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓 then raised her eyes to him, and her gaze, the same burning gaze from the market, pierced him again. "Words can be weapons sharper than swords. My father does not understand them, but I do." Gyges tilted his head slightly. "Sometimes, a single story can stop a war." 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓 studied him carefully. "You speak beautiful words for a scribe, but your eyes say something else. You are not what you seem." Gyges bit his lip. He wanted to reveal his identity, to shout who he was, but he knew that would mean destruction. However, in that moment, an invisible thread was tied between them, a silent recognition. As they spoke, Gyges felt more and more attracted to her. 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓 had a beauty that did not lie only in her eyes or features. It was the beauty of a flame that refuses to go out, even if it is held in chains. "You are the daughter of Arganthos," he said finally, with a kind of boldness. She smiled bitterly. "I am his prisoner. We do not choose names and blood." Gyges felt his soul shuddered, and those words was all the pain and all the nobility that a heart could bear. He understood now that 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓 was not just a princess. She was a woman trapped in an iron world, seeking freedom, and her beauty became, in his eyes, not just physical, but a tragic beauty, burning and consuming. Words became few, but their gazes spoke more than he would have dared to say. Whenever her eyes rested on him, Gyges felt himself burning. It was a gaze that not only saw him, but stripped him of his secrets. Finally, 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓 closed the book and said softly, "Your eyes are not those of a scribe. They are the eyes of a king or a warrior." Gyges froze, but she continued, "I will not ask you who you are, but know that not all hearts in this palace beat for blood." Then she stood up and left the hall, leaving him alone, his heart consumed. When he returned to the 7 chosen, Gyges was a different man. He did not tell them everything he had experienced, only a few words about the palace and the weaknesses of the Cimmerians. But his mind was full of the princess's eyes, and his chest was ablaze with the fire of that gaze. That night, in the tent at the edge of the forest, he tried to sleep, but he could not. Her face, her voice, and the question kept appearing to him, what if 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓's heart could be the key to peace between the kingdoms? The morning found him with a troubled soul. He thought of Queen Pyrisane, of his vows, of the people who awaited him, and yet, deep in his heart, he felt that something irreversible had happened. 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓's gaze was not just beauty. It was a flame that had entered him, a flame that could not be extinguished by duty, nor by war. It burned him, called him, bound him to her in a mysterious way. And for the first time, King Gyges understood that the battle that was to come was not fought only on the battlefields, but also in the depths of his heart. The meeting between Gyges and 𝕳𝖉𝖓 is not just a meeting of eyes, but the beginning of a bond that will disturb them and change their destiny. Her gaze becomes the flame that consumes his soul and forces him to choose, sooner or later, between love and duty. Chapter 9. Forbidden Desire. Night had descended upon the Cimmerian palace like a black velvet cloth, adorned with cold stars. The thick walls, lit here and there by smoky torches, seemed to watch over a deep sleep of the kingdom. But in Gyges' soul, rest was a distant dream. Two voices intertwined in his mind, that of Queen Pyrisane, who reminded him of his oaths and duty, and that of 𝕳𝖉𝖓's gaze, which burned him with an intensity that was difficult to extinguish. Since he had returned to the camp, his thoughts had been an endless series of turmoil. Every moment, the princess's face appeared before his eyes, like a mysterious call. He told himself that he must not give in, that a king cannot be a slave to desires, but his heart refused to obey. That night, with the ring on his finger, Gyges left the camp and crept back towards Arganthos' palace. His steps were guided not by strategy, but by a burning desire that even he did not dare to name. "This is madness," he told himself. "She is the daughter of the enemy, and I have a queen and a people who rely on me." But with every wall he passed unseen, with every dark corridor he crept into, he felt the ring inevitably lead him to a single door, that of Princess 𝕳𝖉𝖓's room. The door opened silently onto a room filled with sweet scents, myrrh, wild rose, and incense. The heavy velvet curtains were drawn, and moonlight filtered through a small window, leaving silver streaks on the marble floor. 𝕳𝖉𝖓 slept on a high bed with a white canopy, like a living statue carved by the gods. Her face, serene in her dream, seemed untouchable, and Gyges felt guilt pressing down on him, even harder to remember Pyrisane, his queen, her eyes full of trust. How could he stand there, in another woman's room, carried by desire? And yet, his legs wouldn't listen to him. He approached slowly, his heart beating like a drummer. Slight rustle made 𝕳𝖉𝖓 stir in her sleep. Her eyes opened suddenly, sparkling in the semi-darkness. Gyges remained still, invisible under the power of the ring, but her gaze lifted as if she sensed his presence. "Who's there?" she whispered, in a voice that was not afraid, but curious. Gyges clenched his fists. Part of him wanted to run, to leave everything behind. But something else, stronger, pushed him forward. With a decisive gesture, he turned the ring and showed himself. 𝕳𝖉𝖓 looked at him without surprise, as if she had been waiting for him. "I knew you would come," she said softly. Gyges felt himself collapsing in her eyes. "I shouldn't have. I have no right to be here." She stood up, her black hair sliding over her shoulders. "And yet you are." A heavy silence stretched between them, in which heart spoke louder than words. Gyges felt that each breath of hers brought him closer to the edge of the abyss. He reached out, without realizing it, and lightly touched 𝕳𝖉𝖓's arm. Her skin was warm, alive, and a shiver ran through him from head to toe. "You don't understand what you are doing to me," he whispered. "I am a king, I have a wife, I have vows. But next to you, the vows seem like mere shadows." 𝕳𝖉𝖓's eyes burned in the pale light. "I didn't ask you to come, but I can't drive you away either. Maybe the gods are laughing at us, Gyges. Maybe we're meant to be enemies, but hearts don't obey laws." Gyges lowered his forehead close to hers. "You are forbidden to me, 𝕳𝖉𝖓, but my desire knows no prohibitions." That moment, the face of Pyrisane appeared in his mind. His queen, the one who had supported him, who had been by his side since the first days of his reign. He felt an open wound in his soul, a cry of guilt. He suddenly moved away, breathing hard. "I can't. I have no right to touch your hand." 𝕳𝖉𝖓 looked at him sadly. "But do you have the right to burn your heart? Do you have the right to refuse your own desire, just because the world has put chains on you?" Gyges closed his eyes. He wanted to shout, to say that he was right, but also that oaths were heavier than desired. He was caught between two fires, duty and forbidden love. 𝕳𝖉𝖓 approached him without fear. "I know who you are, Gyges. You are neither a scribe nor a merchant. You are the king of Lydia, my father's enemy. And yet, I cannot hate you." Gyges turned to her, astonished. "You know, and yet you did not betray me?" She smiled bitterly. "If I had betrayed you, you would be in chains now. But I cannot, because when I look at you, I do not see an enemy, but a man who could change my fate." Her words disturbed him more than anything. He reached out his hand again, touching her cheek. This time, she did not shy away. Their eyes grew closer, and the silence became an unspoken oath. But just then, the sound of footsteps in the corridor made them jump. Gyges turned the ring again, disappearing before the guard could open the door and ask if everything was okay. 𝕳𝖉𝖓 answered calmly, with a smile that hid the fire in her soul. When the footsteps moved away, Gyges still remained invisible. Looked at Seraphina, who sat down on the bed again, but her eyes were now full of tears. He wanted to take her in his arms, to tell her that they would find a way, but he knew that any extra moment could be fatal for him. He retreated into the night, his heart torn. Arriving at the camp, Gyges could not sleep. Her words echoed in his mind, "I cannot hate you." He felt her touch still on his skin, and guilt crushed him. Pyrisane was waiting for him, his people needed him, but Seraphina had lit a flame in his soul that he could not extinguish. He walked through his tent, clutching the ring in his palm, felt it as a blessing and a curse. With its help he could penetrate anywhere, even the heart of an enemy princess, but nothing could save him from his own forbidden desire. "May the gods forgive me," he whispered. "If this love is a sin, then I burn in sin." Thus ends this night of turmoil. Gyges, the king who carried the burden of a kingdom, had become the prisoner of a desire that defied his duty and oaths. The meeting with Seraphina had opened a wound that could no longer be closed. Her gaze, her touch, her words were now stronger than any army, stronger even than his ring, and Gyges knew. If he gave in to this forbidden desire, fate would never be the same again, neither for him, nor for Lydia, nor for the Cimmerian princess. Chapter 10. Princess Seraphina in Love. The palace of King Arganthos was immersed in the silence of a late morning, a dense silence that seemed to press down on the stone walls and deepen the shadows that did not easily dissipate. The cold stone of the walls, silent witness to centuries of history, kept the echoes of the past night, as if the darkness had taken root in it and did not want to leave. The pale rays of the sun struggled to penetrate the clouds, and their hesitant light barely managed to touch the empty corridors, giving them a dreamy air suspended between night and day. In this heavy atmosphere, Princess Seraphina's room was a small sanctuary of inner turmoil. Sitting on the edge of the bed, her gaze lost, the princess seemed detached from an old painting. She had woken up long before the usual hour, but sleep had not been on her side. Her mind was troubled, her heart was pounding with an unknown restlessness, and every passing moment was deepening her deeper into the web of feelings she had never experienced before. It was hard to admit, even to her own conscience, but she knew that she had fallen in love. King Gyges, with his mysterious aura and piercing gaze, had stolen her peace and left a void full of longing in her soul. Their meeting had been like a shadow, unexpected, almost unreal, but impossible to forget. How had he arrived in her room? How had he slipped in without anyone seeing him? And, above all, why did his eyes seem to burn with a flame that responded to the call of her heart? Seraphina did not know about the enchanted ring that Gyges wore, a ring that gave him the power to become invisible. For her, his presence had been an enigma. She had seen him hiding behind the heavy curtains, and then he had disappeared in an inexplicable way. The entire episode had been inscribed in her memory like a dream from which she did not want to wake up. She tried to find rational explanations, but her mind refused logic, for it was her heart that dictated now. He will return. This thought arose in her again and again, like an unspoken prayer. She felt, without having any proof, that fate had not brought the two of them face to face for only a fleeting moment. She was convinced that Gyges would return, and then she would ask him questions, look at him again, find out the truth. She did not want to remain a prisoner of doubts, but until then she had to take care. Their meeting had to remain a well-kept secret, hidden from the curious glances of the courtiers, the suspicions of King Arganthos, and even the whispers of the palace, and a place where every step was watched, where rumors grew faster than spring flowers. Her love could be a danger, therefore. She called her maid, Lyra, the only one she completely trusted, with a firm but trembling voice. She ordered her not to let anyone into her room. Lyra, devoted and discreet, bowed her head and obeyed without question. She could tell that the princess was troubled, but loyalty prevented her from investigating more. Then she was allowed. She left in silence, and Seraphina was left alone, with her thoughts circling like restless birds. The room was filled with an even greater silence. The silence was so dense that the princess had the impression that she could hear the beating of her own heart. She rose slowly, let her bare steps slide on the cold floor, and approached the window. The thick curtains still retained the echo of Gyges' presence. She ran her hand over their heavy fabric, as if she could touch his invisible traces. She thought then of his face. Those piercing eyes, full of mystery, the lips that seemed to hesitate between speaking truths or hiding them, the silhouette that emanated power, but also a hidden restlessness. Gyges was not just a king. He was a living mystery, a force that troubled her soul. Seraphina felt her heart divided between fear and desire. On one hand, she feared what being close to a man like him could mean, a man who carried mysteries about him that were impossible to reveal. On the other hand, she wanted to see him again, to hear his voice, to touch his hand. Between these extremes, her soul struggled like a captive bird. The hours passed. The morning light changed, but the princess's restlessness remained the same. She walked around the room, touching familiar objects as if they were foreign. The mirror looked at her with her pale face and eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. She placed her hand on her chest, trying to calm her breathing, but all she felt was the void left by Gyges' absence and the corridors of the palace. Life followed its usual course. The servants moved silently, the soldiers changed the guard, and the courtiers murmured their little intrigues. But in Seraphina's room, time seemed suspended. She was a prisoner of her own feelings, a prisoner of a love that had barely sprouted, but which burned with the intensity of an uncontrollable fire. And that silence, the princess began to imagine her future. If he had returned, what would he have said to her? How would he have looked at her? And, most importantly, how would she have felt around him? Her mind was weaving scenarios, some full of tenderness, others of danger. She knew that any connection with Gyges could bring not only happiness, but also suffering. She knew that fate would put obstacles in their way, that their path could not be easy. But her heart did not take into account reason. The sun rose. Seraphina felt more and more trapped in an invisible web. Every sound in the corridor made her start, hoping that he had returned. Every beat of her heart brought her closer to a truth that she could not yet speak, that her life, as she knew it, was about to change. Gyges had become more than a mysterious king for her. He was the symbol of freedom, of the unknown, of the passion that the cold palace had never offered her and the rigid world of etiquette and royal duties. He was the spark that could ignite everything. And Seraphina, she knew that once this flame had broken out, it could not be extinguished. She closed her eyes for a moment and let his memory engulf her. She felt the warmth of his gaze. She heard in her mind the tone of his voice, almost like a call. A burning desire ran through her from head to toe, and at the same time a strong fear shuddered. What power did this man have over her, that he managed to break her and elevate her at the same time? When she opened her eyes, sunlight had slipped through the clouds, flooding the room with a warm aura. Seraphina felt that it was a sign. Perhaps fate was beginning to reveal its plan. Perhaps their meeting had not been accidental, but written somewhere in a book of fate that neither King Arganthos nor the entire palace could read. But until Gyges returned, the princess remained a prisoner of waiting. She walked to the window again, looking out over the palace walls, as if trying to guess where he was. And at that moment, her heart whispered the same promise again: he will return. Chapter 11. The Call of the Sorcerer Morgoth. The palace of King Arganthos was never completely quiet, for the thick walls, the armed guards, and the incessant footsteps of the servants always kept a murmur of life. But that morning, a disturbing rumor penetrated like a cold wind through the corridors. A guard, pale and restless, appeared before the king, knelt down, and in a low voice said what should never have been said. "Great king, from the room of Princess Seraphina last night whispers were heard, and even the voice of a man." These words fell upon Arganthos like a sword blow. His face darkened, his eyebrows furrowed, and his gray eyes burned with the fire of anger. Seraphina, his daughter, the princess whom he guarded with the jealousy of a sovereign, and how could a ruthless father dare to receive someone in secret? The thought unsettled him even more because it was not an ordinary one, but a dangerous one. What man could enter her room without anyone's knowledge? Arganthos was a prudent king, but also suspicious by nature. He knew that the walls of the palace concealed not only loyalty, but also unseen dangers. He could not ignore what he had learned. With a cold and determined voice, he ordered, "Bring Morgoth." This name made the air in the hall tremble. The wizard Morgoth was feared and respected alike. Bearer of secrets, knowledgeable of forbidden arts, he was the one the king called upon only when the shadows seemed deeper than the day. Morgoth was no mere servant, but a dangerous ally, shrouded in an aura of mystery, whom some considered almost more powerful than the throne's advisors. When the wizard entered, the room seemed to cool. His long white hair shone like dull silver, and his black eyes seemed like two bottomless abysses. He bowed before the king, but without servility. He always maintained that distance that reminded everyone that his power was not worldly, but born from another realm. "Morgoth," Arganthos said, "shadows have crept into my palace." Voices were heard in the princess's room in the middle of the night. Man entered there, without the guards knowing. "Investigate and tell me the truth." The wizard slowly raised his gaze, and a faint smile stretched the corners of his lips. Not from joy, but from the satisfaction of the one who felt that the intrigue was deepening. "The truth, your majesty, is not easily discovered, but I have my means." Morgoth asked to be taken to the princess and Seraphina's room. The pale morning light enveloped her restless face. When she saw the wizard, she flinched. His presence had something oppressive, like a shadow crushing the surrounding air. However, she maintained her dignity, looking at him with her large blue eyes, which hid the turmoil of her heart. "Princess," Morgoth said in a low voice, almost a whisper, "nothing happens in this palace without leaving a trace. Tell me, what secret are you hiding?" Seraphina felt her heart stop for a moment. How could she admit it? How could she tell the truth, when her love for Gyges had to be hidden at all costs? She gathered her strength and answered, "I am hiding nothing, Master Morgoth. Last night I was alone. Perhaps the wind made it seem like someone was talking." The wizard reached out his bony hand and touched the edge of the bed lightly. He felt the vibration of the place, as if listening to the traces left in the fabric of the air. His eyes narrowed, a sign that he was not entirely convinced. "Maybe," he murmured, leaving the sentence unfinished. He withdrew without insisting, but the glint of suspicion remained in his gaze. He knew that the princess was hiding something, and his instinct was rarely wrong. In her absence, Morgoth returned to the door of the room. He took out of a small bag a shining powder, fine as golden sand, which he scattered in an invisible circle. The powder had the power to retain the traces of those who crossed the threshold, even those unseen. It was an old trick of his. Magic, meant to reveal the truths that people wanted to hide. After that, the wizard withdrew to his own room. Morgoth's room was a world in itself. Books with dark leather covers, bottles of liquids of strange colors, animal skulls, parchments covered with ancient signs, and, in the center of the room, a mirror huge, framed with scrap iron and the runes of time. This was the enchanted mirror, the tool through which Morgoth could see what mortal eyes could not capture. He approached it and uttered a few incantations in a long-forgotten language. The mirror stirred like water touched by the wind and slowly began to show him shadows. He saw the door to Seraphina's room. He saw how the magic dust glowed faintly, and then the unseen silhouette of someone entered the room. Morgoth frowned, could not see the man's face. The magic of Gyges' ring was too strong, masking his identity even from the wizard's eyes. All that remained were the footprints on the magic dust, which betrayed his presence. Heavy, sure. Steps of a man who knew what he was doing. The mirror showed him only the entrance, not what had happened inside. The power of the ring was like a curtain that fell across the room, hiding the event. The spirits of any gaze, be it human or magical. Morgoth felt a bitter frustration. He had rarely encountered a spell that confronted him so directly. Time passed, and he patiently watched the mirror. For a whole hour. The steps of the unknown remained in the room. What could have happened there? What connection was there between this stranger and the princess? The questions burned in his mind like a consuming fire. Finally, the footsteps reappeared, leaving the room. The traces slowly faded on the magical dust, a sign that the unseen visitor had left the place. Morgoth let his gaze slide back to the mirror, but it revealed nothing to him. All he knew was that a man had entered and exited, leaving no trace but his mysterious footsteps. The wizard remained silent for a long time, his hands clasped behind his back. Troubled thoughts swarmed in his mind. Who was this unknown person? What power did he have that he could hide the truth even from his mirror? And, above all, what secret connections did he have with Princess Seraphina? He stood up and said to himself, in a deep voice, "He is no mere mortal." Whoever he was, he possessed a grace or power beyond nature. Morgoth knew he had to be careful. Such secrets should not be told to anyone, not even the king, without clear evidence. However, doubt had taken root in his soul. He felt that the game that was being played within the palace walls would bring dangers not only for the princess, but for the entire reign of Arganthos. He let his hand slide across the cold surface of the mirror and spoke slowly, as if to himself. "The shadows have begun to move. The truth is near, but not yet." And in that moment, Morgoth understood that he was no longer just a witness. He was already part of a greater intrigue than he had imagined, an intrigue in which love, power, and magic would collide, leaving behind only one truth. Chapter 12. The Secret of Love and the Shadow of the Sorcerer. Princess Seraphina's room was bathed in a soft, diffused light, as if the sun had understood that it must keep the secret of that place. The heavy curtains, scented with the scent of jasmine, hung like curtains of a theater hidden from the eyes of the world. In that sanctuary of silence, the first true meeting between the hearts of the two took place. Princess Seraphina and King Gyges. He had appeared again, silent and unexpected, like a shadow that defies the walls and guarded gates. His burning gaze found Seraphina in the same place where she had waited for him, with her soul ravaged by longing. When their eyes met, no words were needed to understand what was burning between them. "You came," the princess whispered, her voice trembling like a barely heard song. Gyges approached and took her hand. Her palm was warm, throbbing with emotion, and his touch was like an unspoken promise. "How could I have stayed away?" He replied, "The days without you are empty, and the nights burn me. I knew I had to come, even if the whole palace was against me. 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖊𝖓 rested her forehead on his chest, listening to the beating of her heart that resounded like a drummer of destiny. That moment, for her there were no more walls, rules, fear, or danger. All she felt was their love, a love that had erupted like a storm and that now demanded to be lived. "If my father only knew," she murmured. Gyges hugged her tighter. "The whole world could rise against us, and I still wouldn't stop. You are mine, 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓, and I am yours." His words filled her soul with a strength she had never known before. For the first time, the princess felt that she was no longer just a king's daughter, subject to duties, but a free woman, loved and desired. In that hour, she and Gyges were united not only through whispers, but through embraces that sealed a bond stronger than the oaths spoken before the throne. Time melted away, and the room became a universe only theirs. They did not know, however, that, beyond the walls, another gaze was watching. The wizard 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖓, with his eyes fixed on his enchanted mirror, only watched shadows, but could not penetrate the deepest secret. The power of Gyges' ring hid his deeds, but the traces left on the magical dust, sprinkled at the threshold, showed the truth. A man had entered the princess's room and spent an entire hour there. When the moment of love was over, 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓 stood up and looked at Gyges with tearful eyes, but shining with happiness. "You must know something, my king," she said, in a serious voice. "The wizard 𝕳𝖎𝖓 came to me. He asked me what I was hiding. He looked at me as if he wanted to penetrate my soul. I felt that he did not believe me. He is dangerous. You must be careful." Gyges caressed her cheek with an unexpected gentleness for a king. "Wizards live in shadows and suspicions. I am not afraid of him. But I am afraid for you. If his suspicions reach your father's ears, our world could collapse." 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓 tightened her arms around him, as if she wanted to protect him from all evil. "Promise me that you will be careful." Gyges smiled bitterly. "I can promise only one thing, that I will come back to you no matter what." He stood up and headed for the door. When he opened the door, his gaze stopped on the floor. There, in the doorway, he saw a shining powder, carefully spread. His footsteps had left fine marks, like fingerprints of a presence that was supposed to remain hidden. Gyges clenched his fists. "Morgatha's magic dust," he murmured. He turned his head to 𝕳𝖎𝖊𝖓, and a dangerous flame burned in his eyes. "He's following us. He knows I've been here, even if he can't see me." The princess flinched. "I thought you used some kind of magic when you came to me. I didn't understand how you managed to get in without anyone stopping you." Gyges hesitated for a moment. He couldn't reveal to her the secret of the ring he wore, the secret that gave him the power to be invisible. This power was both a gift and a curse. "It is not my magic that matters, but the love that carries me to you," he replied, choosing to hide the truth. 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓 looked at him with confidence, as if his words were enough. "Then let love be our shield," she said. Gyges stepped over the threshold, and his footprints, imprinted even deeper in the enchanted dust, knew that 𝕳𝖎𝖓 would see them, that the wizard's suspicions would grow. But his heart was determined. No dust, no mirror, and no magic would stop him from returning to her. When the door closed, 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓 was left alone, overwhelmed by a mixture of happiness and fear. She put her hand to her chest and whispered to herself, "𝕳𝖎𝖓 should suspect what he wants, but I have found what I have been looking for my whole life. I in his room." The wizard 𝕳𝖎𝖓 carefully followed the traces in the dust, the steps that entered and left the princess's room. He did not know who that man was, but he was sure of one thing. The truth could not remain hidden for long, and in his eyes, this truth would not bring love, but only power and danger. Thus, the love between 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓 and Gyges had blossomed in secret, but it was already under the cold gaze of the sorcerer. And once magic had mixed with passion, their fate was sealed. Nothing could remain hidden. Chapter 13. The Shadow and the Escape to the Forest. King Gyges left Princess 𝕳𝖎𝖓𝖓's room with measured steps, but his eyes burned with anger. He had seen the dust scattered at the threshold. He had sensed the danger and understood that the wizard 𝕳𝖎𝖓 was hunting him. The ring made him invisible, but his anger was visible only to himself. In his soul, the flame of revenge burned like an unquenchable fire. "If the wizard dares to play with me, I will show him what it means to provoke a king." He silently headed down the corridors of the Cimmerian palace, an unseen ghost slipping through the stone walls. The guards felt nothing, the servants did not see any shadow. Only the air trembled faintly behind his invisible steps. He arrived in front of 𝕳𝖎𝖓's room. From beyond the door, he could hear rustling of parchments, the sound of moving bottles, and the low voice of the wizard reciting incantations. Gyges slowly pushed the door, without noise, and entered the room. The wizard's room was a mixture of mystery and horror. Shelves loaded with dusty tomes, tables filled with green and blue bottles in which liquors bubbled like living waters, animal skulls that seemed to look at him from the corners, and in the middle, the enchanted mirror, its surface murky like a lake in a storm. 𝕳𝖎𝖓 was bent over the table. stirring a purple liquid in a cup. His lips murmured words of power, and his hand trembled slightly, a sign that the tension had not left him since the discovery of the traces. Gyges approached in silence. His heart was beating fast, but he had only one thought in his mind, to show the wizard that he could not control everything. With a sudden movement, he lifted his foot and struck him hard across the legs. 𝕵𝖉 screamed in surprise, staggered and collapsed onto the table. The cup of liquid spilled. The bottles crashed against each other, and several broke with a noise, spreading strong smells of sulfur and burning herbs. Blue flames rose for a moment from a spilled liquor, lighting up the room like a blaze of hell. "Who's there?" the wizard roared, rising with difficulty and leaning on the edge of the table. But Gyges did not answer. He remained invisible, moving in a circle, striking again, this time overturning an entire shelf of bottles. The noise was heard like thunder in the room, and the spilled liquids mixed in a chaos of colors and steam. 𝕵𝖉 raised his hands and uttered a protective incantation, but no one appeared before him. His eyes widened in fear. "Show yourself, ghost or man," he shouted. "If you are from the shadow of death, you will not defeat me." A short laugh, uttered by Gyges without realizing it, was heard like a whisper in the room. The wizard 𝕵𝖉 froze. "You are not a ghost. You are a man," the wizard whispered, but his voice trembled. "Who are you? What power do you hide?" Instead of answering, Gyges snatched a parchment from the table and threw it into the blue flames. The flickers rose higher, the shadows curled on the walls, and 𝕵𝖉 felt himself caught in a trap of horror. "I warn you, whoever you are," he shouted hoarsely, "your spell will be revealed. No power remains hidden forever." Gyges paused for a moment. His breathing was heavy, but a feeling of satisfaction flared in his heart. It had scared him. It had shaken 𝕵𝖉. The man who believed himself master of secrets and shadows, it was enough, retreated slowly, leaving the room in a chaos of shards, smoke, and spilled potions. The wizard was left alone, staggering and chanting aimlessly, trying to chase away an enemy he could not see. "That's enough for now," Gyges thought. "Fear is the best weapon. It will drain his strength and keep him away from Seraphina." He left the room and walked the palace corridors again. This time he hurried, feeling the need to leave the place where suspicious eyes could follow him at every corner. He did not stop until he reached the great gates, where the guards were changing their shifts. He had passed them like the wind, unseen, leaving no trace but the light rustle of their armor. Once out of the Cimmerian palace, Gyges hurried towards the forest. The tall trees greeted him like silent guards, and the leaves rustled lightly, as if recognizing the footsteps of the one who wore the ring. He stopped in a hidden clearing, where the moonlight intertwined with the shadows of the branches. There, with a sure movement, he turned the ring, and in an instant, his body regained its visible form. The air around him quivered, as if it had breathed with him, and King Gyges felt the weight of the world on his shoulders again. He raised his hands, looked at his palms, and inhaled deeply the clean air of the forest. Not far away, a loud neighing resounded. From the shadows of the trees, his favorite horse emerged, a stallion black as night, with sparkling eyes and the long mane, shining like ebony. Etherean, Gyges spoke with a warmth he rarely showed. The horse approached, stamping the ground with its hoof and shaking its mane. It had waited patiently for him, as if it knew its master would come. Gyges stroked its strong neck, feeling the peace and strength that emanated from the being of this faithful animal. He climbed into the saddle with a determined movement and, for a moment, looked back at the Cimmerian palace, whose towers could be seen through the trees. "𝕵𝖉, let's see how much fear will eat you," he murmured. Etherean snorted and galloped off, carrying the king deep into the forest, where the shadows were not those of wizards, but only of trees and night. And so, King Gyges left behind his first unseen duel with 𝕵𝖉, a duel not of weapons, but of fear and secrets, a duel that was just beginning. Chapter 14. The Return to Ardys and the Shadows of Strategy. The road from the forests of Cimmeria to Ardys had been long and arduous, but for King Gyges' time had passed like lightning. The gallop of his stallion, Etherean, had cut across the plains and valleys as if chasing a spirit of wind, with each beat of his hooves on the ground. The distance between him and the palace of King Arganthos grew, and the silence of the Lydian kingdom became close to him again. When the white walls of Ardys appeared in the distance, the hearts of those who accompanied him trembled. The 7 trusted warriors of Gyges followed him faithfully, their armor shining under the midday sun. They were men tried in battle, bound by oaths of honor and blood to their king. "The Ardys rises majestically, master," said one of the warriors, Ardys, the youngest, with a smile of hope on his face. "From here we will strike and defend Lydia as it should be." King Gyges did not answer immediately. His gaze rose over the walls of the fortress, over the roofs of the palace, where the golden flags with the symbol of the Lydian sun fluttered. He remembered the words of Princess Seraphina, the suspicion of the sorcerer Morgoth, and the dust scattered on the threshold of her room. An uneasiness pricked his soul, but his face remained unwavering. At the gates of the royal palace in Ardys, the warriors stopped and saluted with their right hands on their chests. The king stepped first, followed by the seven. The court was agitated, for news of the dangers and movements of the peoples of the north had already arrived, and the throne room, the commander of the Lydian army was waiting for him, a tall and vigorous man with a braided beard and a gaze as harsh as steel. His name was 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, nicknamed the Shield of the Lydia, because in his youth he had thrown himself in front of a spear meant to strike down the former king. 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓 knelt before Gyges, but immediately looked up. "Your Majesty, the soldiers are restless. Rumors say that the peoples of the north are preparing to attack. What is your order?" Gyges made a sign with his hand, and the warriors approached. Together with 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, they sat down at a long oak table, covered with unfolded maps. "I have brought information that cannot be ignored," the king said, in a low but firm voice. "The wizards and spies of Cimmeria have shown me that the danger will come from the north. The mountain tribes, encouraged by King Arganthos, are seeking to weaken our walls. Their first blow will be there." The commander clenched his fists. "So, the north. The walls there are strong, but not enough to withstand thousands. We must send elite troops." Gyges nodded. "We will defend the north first. The 7 warriors will accompany me, and you, 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, will gather the garrisons from the outlying fortresses. No one outside this circle must know our plan." His eyes darkened for a moment, and in his mind he turned to the face of Princess Seraphina, to her oath of secrecy, and to the fear that the sorcerer Morgoth might tear the truth from her lips. "Reveal nothing, Seraphina, for otherwise everything collapses." Those present in the hall bowed their heads. The decision had been made, and in the evening, after the warriors had retreated, King Gyges remained alone in his royal chamber. The thin rain beat against the windows, and the fire in the hearth crackled softly. He took off his crown and placed it on the table. Feeling for a moment its weight like a heavy stone, he passed his hand over his forehead, and the image of Princess Seraphina returned to his mind. With her warm gaze and restless, he wanted to be near her, to talk to her, to ease her fear. But he knew that the distance between them was not only one of the road, but also one of the secrets that surrounded them. If Morgoth finds out, if he tells her father— Doubt gnawed at his soul, but the king was a man of decisions, not of fear. He clenched his fists and looked at the ring that shone faintly on his finger. That power had been his shield until now, but it could also be his burden. That evening, Queen Pyrisane entered the royal chamber. She wore a white dress, and her steps were so light that they were almost inaudible on the marble floor. "Your Majesty," she said in a soft voice, "it is late, and you have not rested." Gyges stood up and smiled weakly at her. "My thoughts weigh me down, Pyrisane. Lydia is on the brink of war, and I must choose the paths that can save her." The queen looked at him for a long time, without saying anything. She knew him very well, and in his eyes she saw shadows that were not only related to political or military worries. She felt that his heart was struggling between duty and another fire, hidden far from her sight, but she said nothing. She approached and touched his arm, as a gesture of reassurance. "Then rest, Gyges. Tomorrow will be a long day." The king thanked him only with a nod. Pyrisane slowly withdrew, leaving him alone, but in her soul a question arose that she did not dare to say yet. "Who is stealing your thoughts, my husband? Who keeps you awake at night?" Left alone, Gyges bent over the maps again. He traced with his finger the line of the mountains to the north, the small fortresses scattered along the border, and the roads that descended to the fertile plains of Lydia. There the Lydian army's fire wall was to be erected. The plan was clear: to strengthen the fortress of timber and send the elite warriors there, while the auxiliary garrisons were to defend the surrounding villages. Everything had to be done in secret, so that spies would not carry the news further. But behind the decision, Gyges' heart beat restlessly. For, beyond the walls of Ardys, in the palace of Arganthos, a princess awaited him, and with her, a sorcerer followed him from the shadows. "Do not give in, Seraphina. Do not let them snatch your secrets. I protect." Thus ended the day of the return to Ardys, king with his soul divided between duty and love, an army called to defend the north, a silent queen who felt the absence of her husband's heart, and, far away, in the palace of Cimmeria, a sorcerer who lurked from his enchanted mirror. Night fell over Lydia, and Ardys fell asleep, but in the silence of the palace, King Gyges knew that neither sleep nor rest belonged to him any more. Only the fight belonged to him. Chapter 15. The Queen's Doubt. In the palace of Ardys, Queen Pyrisane lived her days with the dignity of a sovereign, but with her heart gripped by an uneasiness that was constantly growing. King Gyges had returned from his secret mission with a changed look to those around him. It might have seemed the weariness of the war that was announcing itself on the border, but to Pyrisane, who knew his every gesture, every twitch, every shadow in his eyes, the change was obvious. Her husband, once firm, unwavering in his words and decisions, now often seemed absent. He smiled less often, was silent more, and lost himself in long contemplations, as if he carried another world in his thoughts. The queen, with her sensitive soul and eyes accustomed to reading what others did not see, had begun to suspect. But she remained silent. One evening, in the great hall of the palace, when the counselors were discussing defensive plans for the north, Pyrisane followed Gyges. She saw his hand playing involuntarily with the ring on his finger, his eyes lost somewhere far away, beyond the maps spread out on the table. "Our king is tired," said an old adviser. "He watches nights for the safety of the kingdom." Pyrisane nodded, but in her heart she felt something else. Tea was not just fatigue. Tea was a hidden burning, a desire that consumed him and that he could not voice. When they returned to their apartments, the queen approached him gently. "Gyges, are you feeling well? You have been different for a few days." He touched her hand and forced a smile. "It's war, Pyrisane. My thoughts are frightening, because I know what can happen to our people." She looked deep into his eyes. She knew he was lying, but she said nothing. She loved him and hoped that, whatever his burden, she would overcome it. Pyrisane was a woman of rare nobility. Raised from childhood to be the wife of a king, she knew that love often meant sacrifice. However, her heart could not help but bleed in the face of this growing distance, and the mornings, she would find him already gone. Evening after evening, he returned late, with heavy steps, as if he carried a secret impossible to share. She prayed to the gods that it would only be the burden of war, but the sleepless nights made her ask herself questions. The queen noticed how Gyges smiled absently, how his gaze got lost in the flames of the torches, as if he had seen someone's face far away. Then her heart would tremble with fear, and yet Pyrisane chose to believe in him. She was convinced that their love, built through years of living together, could not be shaken. She told herself that every king carries with him a time of shadows, and Gyges was going through his. "My husband would not betray me," she whispered to herself in secret. "Not me, not the kingdom." This belief kept her upright. But deep down, a seed of doubt was sprouting, ready to grow at the slightest whiff of truth. The courtiers, more attentive to changes than they thought, had begun to murmur. Some said that the king had been touched by a spirit, that his nights were haunted by visions. Others, more daring, insinuated that Gyges had lost his heart in an unknown place. Pyrisane heard these whispers and swallowed them with dignity. She did not want to give water to the gossip. She did not want to let her face betray the pain. But in solitude, her soul was torn. One night, the queen decided to break down the wall built between them. She prepared a simple meal for Gyges, just for them. Two, as they used to do in the early years of their marriage. "Do you remember?" she said to him with a warm smile. "Back then we weren't king and queen, we were just two people discovering each other." Gyges looked at her, and for a moment his eyes softened. He reached out and squeezed her fingers. "Yes, Pyrisane, I remember." But immediately his gaze slipped elsewhere, and even though he smiled, his heart wasn't there. Pyrisane hid her tears, sipping from her cup with a dignity that wouldn't yield. When he fell asleep, Pyrisane got out of bed and walked alone through the palace gardens. The night flowers spread their scent, and the moon illuminated her pale face. She stopped by the old fountain and let her tears flow. "My gods," she whispered, "if it is the pressure of war, give it strength. If it is something else, give me courage to face the truth." For the first time, the queen admitted to her own heart what she did not dare to say out loud, that Gyges carried within him a love that she no longer recognized. In the following days, Pyrisane remained silent. She did not ask him anything, did not accuse him, did not look at him with reproach. She wore her crown with the same nobility, she fulfilled her duties as queen with the same attention. But in her gaze a melancholy had gathered that no silk veil could hide. For the people, she was the rock on which the kingdom rested. For Gyges, she had become a mute mirror. In her eyes one could read everything he tried to hide. The queen lived a painful contradiction. She loved Gyges with all her being and wanted to believe in him. But her soul whispered to her that there was another secret, one that stole her smile and made him always seem far away. She did not dare to ask him directly. She was afraid not of the answer, but of the confirmation of her fears. Therefore she clung to silence, like a veil under which she hid her pain. Thus passed the days of Queen Pyrisane, between unwavering faith and the doubt that grew silently. She chose to be silent, to believe that everything was just the burden of war, but deep in her heart she knew that her love was being tested by an unseen force, and while Gyges struggled between duty and passion, Pyrisane became the face of silence, of waiting and of hidden suffering. A queen who, although she felt the approaching storm, continued to walk her path with dignity, convinced that only the truth, no matter how painful, would ultimately reveal what was hidden in the king's heart. Chapter 16. Victory of the First Battle. Morning was rising over the northern plains of Lydia with an air of tension and expectation. The sky was covered with heavy clouds, foreshadowing not only a meteorological storm, but also the approaching conflict. The Cimmerian army, prepared for a lightning attack, had gathered its troops at the borders of the kingdom. But King Gyges, using the information gained in his invisible incursions, knew every step of the enemy, every hidden path, every forest and hill that could be used for ambushes. In the Lydian command tent, Gyges stood with the map spread out before him. The 7 chosen ones, Ardys, Thyros, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, Damaris, Kallion, Phorbas, and Eirenaios, surrounded him, each breathing the tension of the moment. "The enemy is coming through the valley to the south," Gyges said, pointing to a route the Cimmerians thought was unobserved. "But we know about it." Phorbas, the most experienced of the 7, looked up and smiled slightly. "Then we will be there before them. Let us surprise them." Beginning in the morning, the Lydian army mobilized with impeccable military precision. The cavalry positioned themselves on the hills that offered a strategic advantage, the infantry spread out in defensive lines, and the archers hid in the forest, ready to strike with deadly precision. King Gyges did not reveal the source of his information to everyone. Only the 7 chosen knew the truth, his nightly raids and the information stolen from the enemy camp by the power of the invisible ring. But every action was calculated, every positioning carefully thought out. "If we stick to the plan," said Ardys, "the Cimmerians will have no chance of surprising us." "Let's show them that Lydia cannot be conquered easily," 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 added in a deep voice. When the Cimmerian troops entered the designated valley, the Lydian army was ready. The archers raised their bows and released a stream of arrows that hit the enemy cavalry precisely, causing confusion and panic. The Lydian infantry, under the command of Damaris and Kallion, formed the defensive wall that repelled the first direct attacks. King Gyges watched everything, strategically positioned in the center of the battlefield. His heart beat with a mixed tension. On the one hand, pride that his plan worked perfectly. On the other, fear of losses, even minimal. Despite his invisibility at other times, now he was visible alongside the people, carrying out his role as a leader who was supposed to inspire and protect. Phorbas noticed a unit of attackers trying to bypass the right flank. "Gyges' right flank," he shouted. Gyges reacted immediately, ordering rapid cavalry maneuvers and using information about hidden routes to block the bypass route. The Cimmerians, surprised and disorganized, had no chance to adjust their plan. On the battlefield, every Lydian soldier demonstrated discipline and courage, inspired by the presence of the king. Despite the frequent and powerful attacks, the men remained in position, executing the maneuvers planned by Gyges. Damaris and Kallion coordinated the infantry with precision. Every move was calculated, every order respected. Ardys cavalry swept across the plains like a furious wind, blocking the Cimmerian retreat and crushing the morale of their opponents. "I have never seen such discipline," 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓 said admiringly. "The plan of the king and the 7 is perfect." "It's just the beginning," Gyges replied, looking out over the horizon where the enemy army was in disarray. The information Gyges had brought invisibly had made all the difference, knew where the reserves of weapons were hidden, where the roads were easiest to block, where the enemy camps were vulnerable. With his precise orders, the Lydians were able to intercept the Cimmerian messengers and destroy small units that were trying to bring reinforcements. The Cimmerians were disorganized, confused, and did not understand why their meticulously planned attack was completely failing. Gyges, observing this, felt a sense of relief and intense satisfaction. His plan had worked. The ring, which until then had been a tool of curiosity and forbidden love, had shown its strategic value. King Arganthos, for his part, did not understand how his plans were collapsing. His messengers brought news of unexpected losses, and his cavalry had been blocked exactly where he had not expected 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓 in the palace. He tried to analyze the situation, but it was too late. The first attack had been successfully repelled. Seraphina, hidden in the palace chambers, watched with amazement and emotion as Lydia managed to repel the first forces of her father. She could not know that Gyges had been the one who had guided their victories from the shadows. To the end of the day, the battlefield was dominated by the Lydians. The wounded soldiers were being cared for, and Queen Pyrisane, although she did not know all the details, felt the relief of victory. The Lydian army had been tested and had managed to resist, even repel the enemy attack. Gyges walked among the people, congratulating their courage, but his thoughts were mixed. The joy of victory was tempered by the thought of 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏 and the night missions that still awaited him. Knew that the war was far away to end, and the sacrifices would be many. Ardys, approaching him, said, "Our king, without you and your information, we would not have succeeded. You saved the kingdom today." Gyges smiled modestly. "It was a victory for everyone, but we must remain vigilant. The Cimmerians will not give up. The victory of the first battle did not mean just repelling an attack. It strengthened the morale of the Lydians, made them believe in the king's abilities and in their collective strategy. In the eyes of the soldiers, Gyges was not just a leader, but a symbol of power and cunning. For Queen Pyrisane, the victory was a confirmation of the man at her side, even if he did not know the secret of the ring in her mind. Gyges had managed to protect the kingdom, and his loyalty and wisdom were irreproachable. As the sun set over the fields of Lydia, Gyges looked north, where the Cimmerian camps were still visible. He knew that the war was only beginning and that many battles would follow. But the first victory had brought him confidence and hope, and the silence of the evening in the Lydian palace. Gyges placed his hand on the ring and felt the weight of his responsibility and power. The victory had been the Lydians, but this secret brought him closer and closer to 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏 and further separated him from Pyrisane. Thus ended the first confrontation, with Lydia triumphant, but with the hearts of the two kings, one Lydian, the other Cimmerian, already tense, and with a forbidden love that floated unseen between borders and destiny. Chapter 17. The Night of Love. The victory of the first battle had been only a respite, and in the Lydian camp there was celebration, but in the heart of King Gyges another storm was brewing. The Cimmerians would return, and he knew that the war would require new strategies, new sacrifices. Yet, despite his royal duties and the burden he bore as a leader, his thoughts ran in the same direction, to the palace in the heart of the enemy land, where a young princess, with eyes like the night and a troubled soul, awaited him without fully knowing it was 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏, the daughter of King Arganthos, who had wounded his heart with her forbidden beauty. In his tent, Gyges tried to fall asleep, but sleep was impossible. He remembered the silken touch of her presence, her warm voice, the way she had looked at him after Morgeth's spell had made him visible. It had not been hatred, it had not been terror. It had been amazement and a mute recognition, as if their destinies had been bound before they had ever looked at each other. He told himself he must refrain. He was king, husband of Queen Pyrisane, leader of a people who trusted him. But his heart, burning like a burning torch, knew no laws or boundaries. Thus, at midnight, when the camp was asleep and the fires flickered dimly, Gyges mounted his stallion Ethereon. He quickly crossed the road to the Cimmerian palace, and at the edge of the 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏 forest, he dismounted, and at the exit from the forest he turned the ring and became invisible. The enemy city was sleeping, tired from the tension of the day and the losses of the battle. Only sporadic guards watched at the gates, but none could feel the unseen steps of the one who was penetrating them into the heart of the fortress. Gyges passed through the silent halls, between columns of black stone and tapestries depicting warrior gods. His heart was beating strong, but not from fear, but from the desire to see her. Finally, he reached the wing where the princess lived, where the candles burned palely, and the scent of jasmine hung in the air. There, in the deepest room, 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏 was waiting for him. The princess was not sleeping. She was standing at the window, her hair loose, letting it flow over her shoulders like a dark waterfall. Her gaze was lost among the stars, as if she were trying to read in the heavens the answers that life had not yet given her. When Gyges entered the room unseen, she started, as if her heart had sensed his presence. "You are here, aren't you?" she whispered, without fear. Then, he spun the ring again and became visible. His gaze met hers, and the silence that separated them collapsed. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏 did not shout, did not call the guards. She just smiled, with a warmth that melted all the walls between them. "You risked coming," she said. "I had no choice," Gyges replied. "Every moment away from you is a heavier burden than the war itself." He approached her and, for the first time, touched his hands to the princess's. It was a timid touch, like two strangers who nevertheless knew that they were bound by the same destiny. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏 searched his face with her black eyes and pulled him closer. "If anyone saw us," she whispered. "The whole world can see us," Gyges replied, "but no one can stop us." And then their lips met in a kiss that seemed to burn the entire room. The hours that followed were like a dream. Without fear, without laws, without crowns or wars, just two people united by the passion that boiled in their blood. They hugged, comforted each other, shared whispers about lives and hidden longings. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖏 confessed to him that she had often felt that she was being followed by a spirit, but she had never thought that. That spirit was a king, her father's enemy. And yet, in his presence she did not feel fear, but a peace that she had never experienced. Gyges told her about Lydia, about his people, about the weight of the throne. but he hid his suffering from being caught between his duty to Queen Pyrisane and the overwhelming love that consumed him for 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌. That night, unspoken oaths were bound between them, that they would be together, even if the whole world rose against them. When dawn began to chase away the stars, Gyges knew that he had to leave. He rose with difficulty, looking at the sleeping face of the princess, serene as the moonlight, a desire coiled in his heart, to stay, to give up everything and live only for that love. But the thought of his kingdom, of Pyrisane and the people, brought him back to reality. He kissed her forehead and turned his ring again. The body disappeared from his sight, but his heart remained there, in 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌's arms. When he returned to the Lydian camp, no one suspected where had been. The 7 chosen ones only looked at him as a tired leader after a night of plans. Pyrisane, looking into his eyes, felt that inexplicable distance again. Gyges, on the other hand, carried in his soul the memory of the night of love, a memory that strengthened and weakened him at the same time. He knew that his bond with 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 could no longer be broken. Tea was more than a fleeting passion. It was a force of destiny. Thus ended the night of love, a night that would change the course of the war. And of hearts. Between Lydia and Cimmeria the flame of conflict continued to smolder, but between King Gyges and Princess 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 another flame burned, even more dangerous, that of an impossible but unstoppable love. From that moment on, the king was no longer fighting only for his kingdom, but also for a secret that, if it had come to light, could have shattered everything he had built. Chapter 18. The Premonition of the Curse. The dawn that followed the great victory brought by the information stolen from the Cimmerian camps had appeared in colors of gold and blood. The Lydian tents were trembling with songs, prayers, and gratitude, and the soldiers felt for the first time that the power of the barbarians could be defeated. But in the midst of this joy, one of the 7 chosen ones looked with cloudy eyes to the stars, as if in their light he read a hidden secret. That was Eirenaios, the most temperate and calm of the warriors, a man who carried within himself not only the arm of the sword, but also the wisdom of the old priests. While the others celebrated, Eirenaios felt an ever heavier pressure in his chest. Ever since he had seen the king use the ring, ever since he had heard him utter ambiguous words about the power of invisibility, one thought had not given him peace, that object, apparently a gift from the gods, concealed within itself an unseen poison. That night, when the camp had fallen asleep, Eirenaios approached the king's tent. Gyges was awake, sitting by an oil lamp, his eyes lost in emptiness. In front of him, the ring glimmered faintly, like a sleeping golden snake. The king turned it on his finger, looked at it, let it shine, as if fascinated by its power. "Great king," Eirenaios said in a low voice, "allow me to say a word to you." Gyges looked up. "You, the wisest of my warriors, do not need permission. Tell me what weighs on your soul." Eirenaios stepped into the tent and bowed his head. "This ring is not just a tool. I saw how you look at it. I saw how it changed your walk and speech. It is as if your soul is becoming more and more tightly bound to it. I fear that a curse dwells in it." Gyges smiled bitterly. "A curse? You say that after it saved our kingdom? Without it, we would not have known the number of enemies, their paths, their weapons. Without it, Lydia would have burned already." "I know," Eirenaios replied. "But listen to me, my king. I have lived long enough to see how the gifts of the gods always come with a price. The ring gives you invisibility, but what does it take in return? Does it steal your peace? Does it confuse your heart between duty and desire?" His words resounded like hammer blows in the king's soul. Gyges felt a cold shiver. Indeed, his peace had been stolen, and his desires were pushing him towards hidden sins. 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 appeared in his mind like a flame that could not be extinguished. "What do you mean?" asked the king, although he already knew the answer. Eirenaios looked at him with unwavering seriousness. "I mean that the ring can win wars, but it can also lose souls. And if the king's soul falls, the kingdom falls with it." Eirenaios then told something that the others did not know. In his youth, he had met an old hermit who had spoken of an object of shadows, given by the gods to men not as a blessing, but as a test. The hermit had told him, "He who carries the power of the unseen will know not only the secret of the world, but also the abyss of his own heart. If he resists, he will be wiser than all. If not, he will be lost forever." "Since then, I have feared the day when that story would come true," said Eirenaios. "And now, looking at you and your ring, I know that day has come." Gyges closed his eyes. 2 voices fought in his soul. 1 told him that Eirenaios was right, that the ring was corrupting his soul. The other whispered that without him he would be powerless, that the kingdom would be defeated, that his love for 𝕳𝖉𝖓𝖌 would fade. That night, the king did not sleep. He remembered the face of Pyrisane, his faithful wife, who looked at him with love and suspicion at the same time. He remembered Seraphina's burning gaze, her whispers, the promise of a forbidden love. He also remembered the people who, on the battlefield, called him their father and shield. How could he reconcile all these faces, all these duties? And then his thought returned to the ring, felt that that object was not just metal, but a living being that whispered desires to him and disturbed his will. The next day, Eirenaios looked for it again. "Great king," he said, "I do not ask you to throw away the ring. I know you will not now, when the war is still burning. I ask only one thing of you, to guard your soul. For the invisibility of the body is nothing compared to the invisibility of sins. If you begin to hide not only your body but also your heart, you will be lost." Gyges looked at him with gratitude, but also with a hidden pain. He only replied, "I will try." But in his heart he knew that the fight was not between him and the Cimmerians, but between him and the desires that tore his soul. The days that followed brought new signs. Whenever Gyges used the ring, he felt something break inside him. First it was just a heavy fatigue, then a strange restlessness, and the late nights, disturbing dreams followed him. He saw a giant waking up from sarcophagus, with eyes of fire, which told him, power is not a gift, but a chain. He hid all this from the others, but Eirenaios watched him in silence and saw how the king's face became darker and darker, how his gaze became heavier, how his steps seemed to carry an invisible burden. Between destiny and choice one evening, when the fires were burning in the camp and the people were singing for victory, Eirenaios approached him again. "My king, I have one more question for you. Tell me, are you sure that the ring belongs to you? Or do you belong to him?" Gyges did not answer. His silence was heavier than any word. Thus, the warning had been spoken. The foreboding of the curse hung over the king and over the entire kingdom. For, beyond the visible war, another, more dangerous one was beginning to grow, the war in Gyges' heart. And if this war were to be lost, no army, no victory, no love could save what was silently ruining the king's soul. Chapter 19. The Cimmerian Counterattack. The sun had barely risen over the northern plains of Lydia, and the wind carried with it a heavy smell of smoke and red-hot iron. The news had spread like wildfire. After the defeat suffered in the first battle, the Cimmerians had not retreated, but had prepared a much more cruel blow. Beyond the hills, the Lydian messengers had seen the massive movement of war chariots, cavalry, and thousands of warriors gathered from the steppe tribes. King Arganthos, furious and humiliated by his losses, had decided to throw the entire power of his people upon Lydia. Was no longer a simple invasion of plunder, but an attempt at total submission, and the Lydian camp, anxiety was visible on everyone's faces. The deafening sound of the Cimmerian drums echoed to the hearts of the soldiers. Every time their beat was heard from afar, many Lydians clutched their shields with trembling hands. Gyges emerged from his tent, wearing royal armor that shone in the sun. He gathered his guard and the 7 chosen ones. Ardys, Thyros, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, Damaris, Kallion, Phorbas, and Eirenaios stood tall, their weapons ready, but also with eyes heavy. Everyone knew that a confrontation like no other was coming. Queen Pyrisane, who had remained in Ardys, had sent a short and decisive message: "Defend the kingdom, O not. Let the blood of the ancestors be trampled underfoot." These words burned their hearts and strengthened their will. Towards evening, the scouts brought disturbing news. The Cimmerians had divided into 3 columns, trying to encircle the Lydian army. Part of the barbarian army was heading towards the villages, to burn and cut off supplies. Another attacked frontally, and the heaviest column, led by Arganthos himself, was trying to break through the flank where the natural walls were missing. "They don't just want to defeat us," Eirenaios said, looking up at the hills that were beginning to fill with smoke. "They want to wipe us off the face of the earth." Gyges looked at his men. He knew that only through courage, strategy, and the information gathered with the ring could he hope to turn back this storm. That night, the king put the ring on his finger again. The 7 waited for him at the edge of the forest, as they had done so many times before. Gyges entered the middle of the Cimmerian camp invisibly. He saw the huge fires burning, lighting thousands of swords. He saw women bringing food and children, already grown up to sing about war, and in the middle, on an iron throne raised above the ground, sat Arganthos, pounding the table with his fists and swearing revenge. The Lydian king listened to the plan spoken by his generals. The main attack was to be launched at dawn, with a rain of arrows, followed by a cavalry charge. But one detail made Gyges start. There was talk of a secret weapon. A huge chariot reinforced with iron and pulled by oxen trained for war, intended to shatter the Lydian walls. Gyges returned with this news. And although his face was unwavering, in his soul he felt that the ring was drawing him deeper and deeper into its nets. The next day, the entire Lydian army gathered in formations. The priests had brought sacrifices to the gods, and the smoke rose to the sky like a fervent prayer. "My brothers," Gyges shouted from his black horse, "the Cimmerians think they can crush us. But they have not taken into account our hearts, nor the gods who watch over us. We will fight for our lands, for our wives and children, for Sardis and for the future of Lydia." A huge shout rose, and the army was filled with courage. The 7 chosen ones positioned themselves near the king, determined to be his shield and sword. When the sun rose, the Cimmerians began the attack. The sound of the drums intertwined with the thunder of the footsteps of thousands of soldiers. Their arrows poured like a black rain, but the Lydian shields rose like an iron wall. Then came the shock of the cavalry. The Cimmerian horses charged furiously, but the Lydian spears stopped them in waves of dust and blood. And yet, the most terrifying moment came with the appearance of the iron chariot, a huge monster, driven by massive oxen, advanced like a mobile fortress, crushing everything in its path. Then Gyges gave the signal. The 7 rushed to the chariot. Ardys and Thyros struck the wheels with their swords, trying to break them. 𝕳𝖎𝖉 and Damaris threw flaming torches, igniting the hides of the oxen. Kallion and Phorbas climbed atop the chariot, fighting the warriors who guarded it. Eirenaios, with his heavy shield, managed to stop the monster's advance for a moment, but the blow knocked him down, and the earth trembled beneath him. However, his sacrifice bought time for the others. The iron chariot caught fire, the oxen rushed madly, and the secret weapon of the Cimmerians collapsed in a cloud of smoke and flames. Seeing his weapon destroyed, the Cimmerian army began to falter. Gyges, raising his sword to the sky, shouted, "The gods are with us! Forward!" Waves of Lydians rushed in, pushing back the barbarians. The battle turned into a bloody hand-to-hand fight, where every moment meant life or death, and in the midst of this chaos, Gyges again felt the call of the ring. He twisted it on his finger and became invisible. Slipping through the enemy ranks, he struck from the shadows. It appeared and disappeared, spreading panic among the barbarians. But with each use, a cold shiver ran through his heart. He heard an old voice whispering to him, "Victory is yours, but peace of mind is lost." And yet, he did not stop. By evening, the field was full of dead and blood. The Cimmerians, crushed and demoralized, had retreated north. Arganthos himself had barely managed to escape, swearing that he would return. The Lydians burst into shouts of joy. New victory had been won, and the kingdom had been saved once again. Gyges, however, looked at the red sunset sky and could not feel that joy. He saw the fallen, the wounded Eirenaios, and heard again his warning, "The ring may win wars, but it may lose souls." He clenched his fist over the ring and felt the metal burn. He knew that, although the war against the Cimmerians was not yet over, the real battle that awaited him was the one within himself. Thus ended the day of the Cimmerian counterattack, a day of blood and glory for Lydia. But in the shadow of victory, deep in the heart of King Gyges, the curse of the ring tightened its chains. Chapter 20. Seraphina in Prayer. The Cimmerian palace had fallen into a heavy silence, broken only by the hurried steps of the servants carrying news of the new defeat. King Arganthos had locked himself in the throne room, shouting at his generals and preparing a new battle plan. But far from this din, in her secret chamber, Princess Seraphina bowed her knees before the altar of the steppe gods. The room was dimly lit by scented candles, and the walls were covered with tapestries of divine figures, gods of storm, earth, and war. In the middle was a large bronze vessel filled with clear water, into which the princess gazed as if in a mirror, seeking answers. Ever since she had discovered Gyges, the unseen man who had penetrated the secret of her chambers, Seraphina's soul had not found peace. A bond had been born between her and the king of enemies that defied not only her father's laws, but also the order of the world. And his eyes, she had seen a flame she had never seen in the young Cimmerian warriors, and the touch of his hand had to him, even when he was invisible, had given her the sensation of a calling beyond death and life. But at the same time, her Cimmerian blood screamed at her that she was a traitor. Her father fought desperately to defend his people and avenge his defeats, and she, his daughter, fell in love with the one who brought him ruin. "Gods of the steppes," she whispered in a trembling voice, "tell me, is my love a sin? Or is it your will that I bind 2 kingdoms through my heart?" Seraphina remembered her childhood. She had been raised to be not just a princess, but a symbol of Cimmerian power. She had learned to ride, to shoot a bow, to speak before warriors. Her father had always told her, "You are not just my daughter, you are the future of this people." She knew that one day she would be given in marriage to an ally, perhaps a powerful tribal chief, to strengthen alliances. But none of this had stirred her heart, until Gyges had appeared. Unseen at first, then revealed through Morgotha's spell, he had shown her another side of power. Not brute force, but the secret of the invisible, the intelligence and courage of a king who was not afraid to penetrate the hearts of his enemies alone. How can I choose between my father's blood and the blood of my heart? She was troubled, raising her eyes to the face of the storm god woven into the tapestry and the water. Her reflection trembled. Tears fell down her cheeks and melted in the liquid mirror. For the first time in her life, the princess felt that she no longer had a clear path. All paths led to suffering. If she followed her heart, she would betray her father and her people. If she obeyed her duty, she would crush the love that had blossomed in her soul. Maybe I'm cursed, she said softly. Maybe the gods chose me to suffer for everyone's sins, and yet the memory of the night spent with Gyges kept her alive. She remembered his low voice, the words whispered in her ear, the way he looked at her as if she were the only being on earth. She remembered how he had told her about Lydia, about the city of Ardys, and about Queen Pyrisane, whom he had mentioned with respect. But also with a silent guilt in Gyges' eyes, she had seen a struggle similar to hers. She knew that he too was caught between his duty as king and their forbidden love. This similarity deepened her love and made her feel that she was not alone in the storm. 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 raised her hands above the water and uttered a prayer like she had never done before. Gods of the steppes, if this love is a sin, burn it out of me and make me again my father's faithful daughter. But if it is destiny, strengthen my heart and open a path through which blood will not be shed again. I want to be a bridge, not a sword. I want to bring peace, not death. A light wind passed through the room and the candles flickered. The princess felt a cold shiver, but also a strange relief, as if her prayer had been heard. Then she remembered the wizard 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, the one who had exposed Gyges, and his eyes. She had seen suspicion and fear. She wondered if 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 suspected anything about their connection. If he had known the truth, he would have told her father, and then everything would have ended in blood. But in her heart, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 felt that not even the wizard's power could stop what had been born between her and the Lydian king. It was a bond older than spells, deeper than the laws of men and the silence of the altar. The princess felt a premonition that the war would become even bloodier, that her father and Gyges would face each other in a decisive battle. She saw in her mind the Lydian king, his ring shining on his finger, and Arganthos, raising the giant sword of his people. And between them, she, caught like a leaf in the middle of the storm. She stood up, wiped her tears, and looked into the mirror of the water. She saw her face pale but determined. "If I must choose, I will choose my heart," she said softly. "And if I perish for it, let my name perish, but not my love." 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 walked out of the room with light steps. The maids looked at her in surprise. Her eyes burned, but there was no longer the same turmoil in them. She seemed more determined, as if her prayer had given her an answer. That night, when the full moon rose over the palace, the princess sat at the window and looked out over the dark fields. She knew that somewhere, in the enemy camp, Gyges was thinking of her, and she felt that their bond was now sealed, not by men, but by the gods. Thus, within the walls of the Cimmerian palace, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 wept and blessed her love. Her prayer did not yet bring clear answers, but it prepared her for the storm that was to come. While the war between the kingdoms continued, a decision was born in her heart to unwavering, to be with Gyges, even if it meant betraying his blood. Because love, when born from the depths of the soul, is stronger than all laws and curses. Chapter 21. The Sword and Betrayal. The palace of King Arganthos was filled with unrest. The war with the Lydians dragged on, and defeats gathered like heavy clouds in the sky of Cimmeria. The generals grumbled, the warriors were frustrated, and rumors began to circulate among the people about an unseen enemy who crept into the camps, stole secrets, and brought disaster. Only 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉, the court wizard, understood the truth. Since the last discovery, when he had managed to reveal the steps of King Gyges in the chambers of Princess 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉, he had carried his suspicion like a sword hidden under his cloak. He had told no one the whole story, but his black eyes followed the princess's every move. One night, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 let his soul float through a dream, calling upon the shadows of the steppes to reveal the truth to him. He saw the face of Gyges, enveloped in the glow of a cursed ring, and next to him, the face of 𝕳𝖉𝖉, burning with desire. Between the two, a bloody sword rose, a sign of the betrayal that was about to happen. He woke up sweating, his hand shaking. "So the princess secretly carries the heart of the enemy," he murmured. "If the king finds out, her blood will flow. If not, the entire kingdom is lost." 𝕳𝖎𝖉 began to spend more time near the princess. He claimed to bring her protective talismans and herbs for the tranquility of dreams, but in reality he was watching for signs of her restlessness, and it was not difficult for him to discover them. Lost glances, hidden sighs, nocturnal retreats to secret rooms. One evening, he saw her in the palace garden, looking at the stars, with a secret smile on her lips. 𝕳𝖎𝖉 felt that he needed no further proof. 𝕳𝖎𝖉 lived for a hidden love. "Soon," he whispered, "the sword of truth will rise." The wizard possessed an ancient weapon preserved by his people, the Sword of Shadows, forged during the great Cimmeria migrations. It was said that its blade not only cut bodies, but also hidden bonds. Morgoth believed that once the betrayal was revealed, this sword should be the one that would bear the punishment. He took it out of its obsidian sheath and placed it on his altar, lighting black candles around it. "I swear by this blade," he said solemnly, "that I will reveal the truth to the king and sever the bond between his daughter and our enemy." Although Morgoth was a man of shadows, there was an old wound in his soul. Years ago, he had been allowed to be the teacher of Princess Zeraphina in the secrets of writings and plants. Then, for a moment, he had imagined that the girl showed him a greater gentleness than the others. He had misunderstood her, and a desire had been born in his heart that he had repressed. Now, when he saw that her love was directed towards a stranger, and another invisible one, who was bringing ruin to the kingdom, jealousy burned in his heart. Better to see her dead than in the arms of the enemy. He told himself bitterly. One morning, Morgoth appeared before the princess with a stern face. "Princess," he whispered, "I have seen shadows following you. They are not shadows of spirits, but of a man. Tell me, who visits you in the middle of the night?" Zeraphina felt the blood drain from her cheeks. She tried to smile, but her voice trembled. "It is no one, Morgoth. Only my dreams." The wizard looked at her for a long time, as if he had read her soul. "You are lying, princess, but know that the truth cannot be hidden forever, and when it is revealed, the sword will fall." Zeraphina stood alone, trembling. She knew that Morgoth had discovered her, and she knew that their secret days with Gyges were about to end. That evening, Morgoth appeared in the throne room before King Arganthos. He said nothing yet, but a plan had formed in his heart. He did not want to just tell the truth, but to use it to increase his power at court. "The king needs a man who can see shadows," he told himself, "and I will be that man." With every step he took, his oath strengthened. He would not stop until Zeraphina and Gyges were forcibly separated, and in the meantime, the princess had retreated to the altar again. She had bowed her head and clenched her hands. "Gods of the steppes, you have sent the sorcerer's sword upon me. If my love is doomed, give me the courage to die. But if it is meant to unite the kingdoms, then save Gyges from my father's wrath." Tears flowed from her eyes, but behind them was a growing determination. If Morgoth dared to betray her, she would fight for her love to the end. And the days that followed, rumors of the invisible spirit reached the ears of the Cimmerian warriors. Some said he was a god punishing the people, others that he was a Lydian spy. King Arganthos grew angrier and demanded answers. Morgoth felt his moment approaching. He readied his sword, repeated his words, and wrapped himself in his black cloak. "Soon," he thought, "I will tell the king the truth, and then blood will flow. Perhaps the blood of a traitor, perhaps of a princess." Thus, in the palace of Cimmeria, while the war continued on the borders, another battle was preparing inside, that of hearts. Morgoth, with his sword and oath, became the threatening shadow that hovered over the secret love between Zeraphina and Gyges. No one knew yet who would fall under the blade of betrayal, the king's daughter, the Lydian king, or even Morgoth himself. But the clouds of fate were gathering, and every beat of the princess's heart was a desperate call for help. Chapter 22. The Great Battle. That morning, which should have been peaceful, opened with the sound of drums, the roar of horns, and the earth trembling under the footsteps of tens of thousands of warriors. The Cimmerians had gathered their full strength, streams of warriors armed with long swords, black shields, and spears adorned with wolf furs were descending the valleys, pushing a wave of fear before them. On the other side, on the hills that guarded the Lydian plains, lined up the army of King Gyges and the body of 7 elite warriors. Ardys, Thyros, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉𝖊𝖓, Damaris, Kallion, Phorbas, and Eirenaios stood at the forefront, like the pillars of an unshakable fortress. Queen Pyrisane, who remained in the capital, had sent messengers with blessings and prayers to the gods, but on the shoulders of the burden of the entire destiny had fallen on the king and his men. Gyges had hidden his anxiety, knew from his invisible incursions into the enemy camps that the Cimmerian army was more numerous and cruel, but also that their confidence was wavering. The wizard Morgoth kept them united through fear and through the legends of the invisible spirit that haunted them. "Today we are not just soldiers," Gyges shouted to his people. "Today we are the wall between Lydia and destruction. And know this, even though they are more numerous, we carry within us the truth of our cause. Not for gold, but for our land and families we fight." His words ignited the hearts of the soldiers. The 7 approached the king, forming their common oath. "We will not yield," said Thyros, raising his axe. "We will stand until our last breath," Eirenaios, the oldest of them, insisted. The horns had sounded. The Cimmerians advanced in waves, covering the plain like a storm of arrows. The Lydians descended in close formation, shield to shield, spear to spear. The first shocks shook the ground, the sound of metal striking flesh and wood, the cries of warriors, the smell of dust and blood. Ardys led a lightning attack on the right flank, splitting the Cimmerian ranks and forcing them to retreat. 𝕬𝖎𝖉𝖉, with his horn bow, sent arrows that pierced the chests of the enemies even before they raised their shields. Damaris, the brave warrior, swung a long sword like a wing of fire, felling 3 opponents at once. But the enemy did not weaken. Wave after wave, they rushed upon the Lydians, and the battlefield it became a mixture of screams and fallen bodies. King Gyges, although he had the ring of invisibility at hand, had chosen to remain visible, fighting at the head of the army. The ring was his secret weapon, but today the people had to see their leader as a pillar of courage. With his shield raised and his sword shining in the sun, the king split the enemy crowd. His voice echoed across the field. "Lydia, hold the line." Seeing him, the soldiers had regained strength, and even when the Cimmerian spears broke their ranks, the king's face made them return to formation. Each of the 7 wrote their own legend that day. Ardys overturned the chariot with his strong arms, crushing the wheels and scattering the horses. Thyros rushed into the midst of the greatest dangers, striking with his double axe until the field became a circle of corpses. 𝕬𝖎𝖉𝖉, unharmed, continued to shoot arrows even as the enemy's arrows passed by his temples. Damaris tore off the Cimmerian standard and threw it to the ground, shouting, "No wolf shall rule over us." Kallion used his intelligence, directing small groups of Lydians to surround isolated enemy units. Phorbas fought like a rock, protecting the king from any attack from the rear. Eirenaios, with his old calm, encouraged the young, shouting war psalms that covered the sound of swords. But it was not just swords and spears that decided the fate of the day. From a nearby hill, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 had raised his hands and invoked the powers of the shadows. The sky darkened, the wind rose, and a black cloud descended over the battlefield. Many Lydians felt fear, believing that the gods had abandoned them. Gyges then spun his ring. Making himself invisible for a moment, he moved through the ranks to the sorcerer's hill and faced him. 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 felt the vibration of his presence, but could not see him. Unseen battle began between the power of magic and the silence of the ring. Finally, Gyges managed to strike the sorcerer with his sword, wounding him in the abdomen. 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 fell to his knees, and the spell dissipated, letting the sky light up again. The Cimmerians, seeing their sorcerer collapsed, hesitated. It was the first time their faith in victory was wavering. King Gyges became visible again and raised his sword, shouting, "The shadows have fallen. Now is our time." The Lydians rushed with renewed fury. The enemy flanks were giving way, and their central troops were being pushed back, and in the midst of the chaos, Gyges faced one of the bravest Cimmerian generals, 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉 the Black. Their fight was fierce, sword striking axe with sparks of fire. Gyges was tired, but his heart was burning. At a last burst, the Lydian king managed to knock down 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖉, raising his head to show it to the army. That image definitely broke the morale of the Cimmerians. The retreat began. When the sun descended, the plain was full of bodies and blood. The Lydians had won, but at a terrible price. Hundreds of warriors lay fallen, among them Kallion, one of the 7, shot down during an encirclement mission. The king bowed his head beside his body, swearing not to forget him. The soldiers raised cries of victory, but in Gyges' heart burned a double wound, the pain of loss and the longing for 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖈, which he could not confess to anyone. Thus ended the great battle between the Lydians and the Cimmerians. Through courage, through the sacrifice of the 7, and through the mystery of the ring, Lydia remained untouched. But the war was not over. The darkness of 𝕳𝖎𝖉𝖉's betrayal, the hidden love for 𝕳𝖉𝖉𝖈, and the doubt of Queen Pyrisane continued to weave shadows over the future. Fate had not yet decided who would remain true master of the Lydia and over the king's heart. Chapter 23. The King's Mercy. The fields on the border of Lydia smelled of ashes, red-hot iron, and dried blood. The torn banners of the Cimmerians fluttered like rags over the bodies of the fallen. The Lydians, though torn by loss, raised songs of victory. In their midst, King Gyges wiped his sword on the claymores of a fallen enemy and looked at the red sunset, which seemed to flow like a river over the thirsty land. But it was not yet the end. His royal tent, surrounded by guards and bound in bronze chains, sat Arganthos, king of Cimmeria. His forehead was crushed by a wound, his eyes burned with unbroken pride, and every movement of his body commanded fear even in defeat. Everyone expected Gyges to order immediate execution. For so the Cimmerians had done every time they had defeated a rival king. They were cutting off his head and placing it on the walls of the capital as a sign of victory. The Lydian advisors and generals gathered around their king, shouting in one voice, "Kill him, master!" His blood will seal our victory. If you spare him, it will be a sign of weakness. Our people want justice. He brought the sword upon us. He laid waste our villages and fields. Let his life be extinguished here, in front of everyone." Even among the 7 remaining alive, voices rose against him. Thyros, his eyes dark with anger, approached the king. "Brother-in-arms, we have lost Kallion, the best of our soldiers, so that this old wolf may be bound at your feet. The blood of our friend demands revenge. Let me separate his head from his body." But Eirenaios, the wise old man among the 7, raised his hand. "Let us not be in a hurry, O king. The bloodshed cannot be gathered back, but mercy can be stronger than death. Weigh well, for the future of Lydia will hang on your decision." Gyges entered the tent, leaving his men outside. Inside, only the chains and the heavy breathing of Arganthos could be heard. For a few moments, the 2 kings looked at each other like 2 wounded wolves. "Do what is right, Lydian," spat Arganthos. "Cut my throat and show my head to your people. That is how it is between kings." Gyges remained silent. 2 voices echoed in his mind, one of the blood, which demanded death, and one of the heart, which whispered that mercy could change fate. He remembered the face of Zeraphina, the fiery-eyed princess he had met in the chambers of the Cimmerian palace. He knew that, through her blood, Arganthos was more than an enemy. He was the father of his beloved. In an unexpected gesture, Gyges took his sword from its sheath and stuck it into the ground, a step away from the wooden throne on which the prisoner sat. "If I had wanted your death, King Arganthos, you would have been a head on a spear by now. But I choose another path. Your life will be spared." When Gyges came out of the tent, the soldiers and nobles surrounded him, awaiting the verdict. "King Arganthos lives," Gyges said loudly. A murmur of astonishment and revolt ran through the crowd. Many clenched their fists, some even threw their spears into the ground in anger. "How can you let him breathe?" Ardys shouted. "He is the root of all our suffering." "King, you have lost your mind." Thyros screamed. "The people will say you are afraid." But Gyges raised his hand, and silence fell. "It was not fear that made me spare, but power. The power to choose. Not blood, but life. Through this, we will show the world that Lydia does not stoop to the barbarity of her enemies." In her quiet palace chamber, far from the battlefield, Zeraphina prayed. When she heard the news that her father had been defeated and yet lived, tears filled her eyes. "Gyges, only you could have done this," she told herself. "You chose mercy, and through this you chose our love." Although no one suspected the connection between them, the princess felt that the Lydian king's decision was a sign of the hidden love that bound them. And the capital of Lydia, the news reached quickly. Queen Pyrisane listened to the message with cold eyes. "So, my husband spares the life of the one who would have wanted to burn my cities," she said. Wonderful courage or madness? Although in front of the court she kept the mask of the proud queen, deep down a suspicion began to creep in. What had really prompted Gyges to this unexpected mercy? Was it just political wisdom or some other hidden connection between him and the kings? Cimmerians? Meanwhile, Arganthos was brought to Lydia under guard, but not as a slave. King Gyges had ordered that he be treated with dignity, good food, clean clothes, even the right to keep his sword, provided he did not wear it with his hand drawn. "Why are you doing this?" Arganthos asked him. "Because I want to see in the eyes of your people that a king can be more than a beast," Gyges replied. For the first time, the Cimmerian's unwavering pride wavered, and his heart, a flicker of respect for Gyges, began to come to life. And Lydia, the king's decision had divided the people. Some praised him for his magnanimity and wisdom, saying that the gods smile on the one who spares life. Others criticized him, considering him weak and incapable of avenging the Lydian dead. But regardless of the voices of the people, Gyges remained steadfast. He knew that true power lay not only in the edge of the sword, but also in the determination to choose a different path. But in the dark depths of the Cimmerian palace, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 survived. Wounded but not defeated, he learned through spies that his king had been spared. His hatred smoldered even more strong. If King Gyges thinks that mercy will save him, he is mistaken. Mercy is a sword that will cut him from within, and I will be the one to raise it against him. Thus, instead of being crowned with blood, the Lydian victory was sealed by an act of mercy. King Gyges, to the amazement of all, had chosen to spare Arganthos' life, opening the way to an uncertain future. In the eyes of the world, it was a gesture of greatness, and the eyes of some of his own, it was a sign of weakness. And Zeraphina's heart, however, it was proof of a hidden love, and in the shadow of all, 𝕳𝖎𝖉 was preparing his betrayal. Chapter 24. 2 Queens, 1 Secret. In the throne room of Sardis, the shining city of the kingdom of Lydia, torches burned brightly, and the walls adorned with gold and bas-reliefs depicting gods and heroes seemed to vibrate to the songs of victory. King Gyges walked slowly, dressed in the purple chlamys of triumph, surrounded by the 6 remaining warriors of the body of the 7 chosen, and in front of the crowd, Queen Pyrisane stood, proud, shining like a goddess of order and power. She greeted the ovations of the people as if it were a gift from the gods for the victory achieved. For all present, there was not a shadow of a doubt. The kingdom of Lydia had emerged victorious from the war against the Cimmerians, and the peace conquered by Gyges was now guaranteed. And yet, in the heart of the king, hidden beneath the folds of the chlamys and deeper than the secrets of any war, another flame smoldered, the love for 𝕳𝖓𝖉𝖊𝖓, the Cimmerian princess. For weeks on end, the people celebrated the victory. The squares were filled with musicians, dancers and merchants selling masks, wines, and rare foods. Sacrifices were offered to the gods, and poets sang the name of the king in the squares. Pyrisane watched all this with proud calm. She firmly believed that her husband, through his decisions and wisdom, had managed to bring Lydia to the heights of glory, that the bloodshed had been crowned with peace. But every time she looked at Gyges, a small, hidden uneasiness troubled her soul. She felt him changed. His eyes carried a different kind of brilliance, more mysterious, more difficult to decipher, as if his soul had been divided between the kingdom and another invisible realm, and in Ardys, Pyrisane was the official queen, the queen of light, whose authority could not be questioned. She ruled alongside her husband, dispensed justice, received envoys, and supervised the affairs of the palace. But, away from everyone's gaze, in hidden nights, 𝕳𝖓𝖉𝖊𝖓 lived in the shadow of the ring. The Cimmerian princess, kept in Gyges' secret, was like an unseen queen, the queen of his heart, the hidden queen of desires. 2 queens, one of the world, the other of the heart. 1 known to the people, the other known only by the ring and the king's heartbeat. King Gyges continued to use the ring to hide his nocturnal visits. With it, he passed unseen by the palace walls, disappeared from the royal beds without. Pyrisane noticing, and entered the secret chambers where 𝕳𝖓𝖉𝖊𝖓 awaited him. There, time seemed to stand still. There was no more the king, no longer a conqueror, was just a man who lost himself in the eyes of a forbidden woman. Their love was sealed not by public oaths, but by the silence of the ring, witness, and accomplice. But every moment of ecstasy also carried a shadow of guilt. For Gyges knew, for every night spent with 𝕳𝖓𝖉𝖊𝖓, he risked not only his crown, but also his soul. Queen Pyrisane was not a woman to be easily deceived. Wise, patient, but also unforgiving, she began to notice the changes in her husband. Sometimes, Gyges returned late to the royal chambers, his eyes shining with a flame that she no longer recognized. The other times, in the midst of councils with the nobles, he seemed lost, as if listening to an inner music that only he could hear. Pyrisane felt deep in her being that the ring, the cursed gift that had given him power and invisibility, had stolen something more precious than peace. It had stolen her husband, and yet, in front of the people, she kept her imperturbable mask. To everyone, she was the victorious queen, the wife of a wise king, the keeper of peace. But in her heart a nagging question grew: what is Gyges really hiding? Princess 𝕳𝖓𝖉𝖊𝖓, remaining in the shadows, was living a silent struggle. She loved her father, King Arganthos, even after his defeat, but her heart now belonged to the enemy. She knew that if Pyrisane or the courtiers ever found out about her connection with Gyges, she would be lost. But their secret was protected by the invisibility of the ring. She was afraid and, at the same time, she felt that their love was a miracle against fate, a story stronger than the walls of palaces and the hatred between kingdoms. For Gyges, she was not just the princess of a defeated kingdom, but proof that the heart can defy the laws of war. One day, Gyges summoned the entire court. Nobles, generals, priests, and envoys from neighboring kingdoms gathered in the throne room, waiting for a new decree. In their midst, brought from prison, appeared Arganthos, the Cimmerian king, still alive and dignified. The whole world was waiting for the moment when Gyges would break the chains and condemn him. But he spoke in a serious voice. Lydia has won, but not to bring death, but to bring peace. King Arganthos will not be killed, but will live as a friend and witness to the new understanding. A murmur of amazement rose in the hall. Pyrisane, from her throne, hid her anxiety under a calm smile, although in her heart she felt again that something was hidden behind these unexpected gestures. Thus, in the eyes of the world, Lydia was a victorious kingdom, ruled by a just king and a powerful queen. Pyrisane believed that she had kept her husband and throne untouched, and the people saw her as the one who had watched over the victory. But beyond the visible walls of the palace, in hidden rooms, between kisses sealed by invisibility, 𝕳𝖓𝖉𝖊𝖓 lived like a queen's secret, known only by the ring and the heart of Gyges. 2 queens shared the same man, one by the laws of the world, the other by the secret of the heart. One shone in the sunlight, the other lived in the shadows of the night. And neither fully knew what the other had. Pyrisane thought she had peace, Seraphina knew she had love. Lydia had triumphed, peace had been won, and the people sang in the squares. But the true story of this victory was not written in chronicles or on parchments, but in the mystery of a hidden love. Gyges was king of Lydia, but a prisoner of the heart. Pyrisane was a queen in the light, but deceived by the shadows. Seraphina was a defeated princess, but queen of the secret. And the ring, a silent witness, linked all these destinies in a story in which power and love mixed with betrayal and mystery. No one knew the truth. Only the gods, perhaps, looked down on him and smiled bitterly, for they knew that no victory is complete when it rests on the secrets of the heart. Epilogue. Time passed over the kingdom of Lydia like a river flowing between two opposite banks, peace and unrest. In Sardis, the festivities still resounded, and the people rejoiced in the fruits of victory. But in the heart of King Gyges, the peace was only a mask. He knew that the real battle was just beginning, an unseen battle, fought not with swords and shields, but with desires and secrets. Late one night, when the palace torches burned pale, Gyges retired alone to his room. He took off his ring and placed it on the table, looking at it as if it were both friend and foe. Its gold shone in the dim light, and the encrusted stone seemed to house a living eye, watching him. The ring had brought him everything: the throne, the power to penetrate unseen among enemies, victory over the Cimmerians, and, most above all, the secret love of Princess Seraphina. But he had also robbed him of his peace of mind, binding him to a double life, divided between two queens. Queen Pyrisane, dignified and unwavering, continued to support him with a faith that had not yet been shaken. She did not know the truth, but suspicion sprouted in her heart like a seed ready to sprout. Seraphina, on the other hand, lived in the shadows, hidden from the eyes of the world, but alive in every heartbeat of the king. Gyges rested his forehead in his hands and whispered, "I have won wars, but I have lost peace of heart. What curse is this, that a ring should be both my weapon and my chain?" Beyond the palace walls, the wind blew through the orchards and brought a murmur of foreboding. History would record the king's victory and the glory of Queen Pyrisane, but history would never write about the stolen kisses, the invisible nights, and the whispered vows between Gyges and Seraphina. The ring remained on the table, shining coldly. It was not just a golden object, but a burden that demanded the price of the soul of the one who wore it. And one day, whether for him or for those who would come after, that price would be paid in full.